Hi, everybody, and welcome to adjusting my sound settings here. And this is Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, Level 1, Lesson 5. The topic today is Mastering the Mind. This particular piece of my curriculum from 10 years ago, I think, is the one that is the most ripe for misinterpretation. It is the one that I am so happy that I am here to refute or be critical about my own work. So please take the notes that I sent out to the student email list or anything that you read in my PDF compilation notes as stuff that was true over 10 years ago, but stuff which I will now rant against. And you will also sense when you read through those notes that my work was cherry-picked. The concepts that I presented are valid concepts in a pristine system. So everything that you read in those notes is valid and accurate, but you just have to add in all of the sentences that I'm saying, declarative statements, in a pristine system. In a pristine system, blah, 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 works in a pristine system. But you are not in a pristine system, as I just get distracted so I can get on a piece of paper for a very long amount of time. Why? Because of a synthetic telepathy frequency grid, a technological apparatus that has been erected on this planet and energized within the past 5 years. So we will just refer to this as the synthetic telepathy grid. You recognize that it also has an overlap in some human telecommunication systems and some of the other things that I usually hold up on my little piece of bad news paper over here. All right. What is different now? What is different from the circumstances when I wrote that curriculum over 10 years ago? The synthetic telepathy grid has artificially connected both people's individual bodies, individual minds, and individuated energy systems and chakra systems in a way that it would never be connected naturally without some form of extreme worldwide planetary interference. And that means that all of the approaches that were workable and appropriate when you were a discrete energy form are now no longer workable or appropriate because you have been connected to a network or a system, of course, not non-consensually. You have been forcibly connected to this larger system. And that means that there's not a way to simply experience your own sorry, my words are not working. Experience your own individuated life without being influenced by other people. So this has to do with the very essence of how I define unconditional love. And unconditional love, I'm very clear in this class, it is here at the level of green, not down here below my navel at the level of orange. The level of orange, and we can pull up a chocolate picture just so I can show this to you so that way you guys know what I'm talking about. We'll just do this really fast. Good, right over here. And let me just collapse this picture for privacy's sake. The level of orange over here is where we have mammalian emotions, and that's of affection or of revulsion or friendship or hugging or caring or snuggling. Those are all the emotions that you feel as a human being. But this level of green is the level of unconditional love, and that is an actual energetic state. So key takeaways and things that are universally truthful and that will serve you going forward, not just at this crappy, miscalibrated job situation here that you're in as a soul. But unconditional love is the tone that you make when there's an equal giving and receiving. So if I give you $10 and you give me $10 back, that is unconditional love. That's very, very different than like love, like you want to hug someone or smooch them or something like that. It is an equal sharing. And in that definition, you can comprehend how you can have an equal sharing, like with a tree, with a planet, with the sun and the stars. Although you might feel caring and affection for these forms of life in the world, what's really happening is an equal amount of energy is being received by you as you are sending back or reflecting back or broadcasting back. And that is a sustenance that sustains both of you, a reciprocity, I should say, that sustains both of you as you move through time. Like I give to you, you give to me. It's a perfect balance. And that also is what is represented by the chakra shape Sorry, it's on my shelf back there. I can run back there and get it if you want me to. But I don't want to ruin my flow. But just the chakra shape that I'm holding up all the time. You guys are smart. You know what I'm talking about at this point. Represents a balance of intake versus output. And that's how that shape is sustainable. Let's also talk about love and your relationship with time. You create the love tone when you are in a balanced, reciprocal, giving and receiving with time. So that means just like that little Pac-Man game. You guys know I do not play video games. I've only really ever played one video game that's Ms. Pac-Man. And so there's Pac-Man here, and then there's these dots, and Pac-Man chomps one dot at a time. Chomp, chomp, chomp. And that is you. And your chakras are literally eating moments in time, ingesting moments in time as you are propelled through time by the wonderful vital dance of your DNA. And you are, moving through these edifices and experiences. When you are in alignment with time and you experience one moment per moment, that means that you are not thinking about the past. You're not hooked on what happened last week or last month or last year or in your childhood or in deep antiquity. And you're also not off balance, like kind of like anticipating the future, like what if, and I wonder what's going to happen with this. You are firmly embedded in the moment now. So what we start to come to with this topic is the topic of topics, which is that humans have a mind that is different than most other animals. Other animals are intelligent, beautifully intelligent. Other organisms here are intelligent. They are genuinely intelligent, like trees, genuine intelligent there, but you just don't speak their language. And so it's easy to diminish sentience and intelligence of the plant kingdom. Or many types of animals have high levels of intelligence, but you don't have an effective communication system with them. And so it's easy to discount them. So definitely like whales have an enormous brain. Elephants have an enormous brain. Dolphins have a convoluted surface area of their brain that actually has more surface area than the surface area of a human being brain. And human being brain, you define thought as the cognitive events that happen. Oh, sorry, I have all sorts of ink on my hands here. The cognitive events that happen through like the sparkling neurotransmitters that are on the outside of the brain. So having more convoluted surface area means more thoughts are happening. Dolphins are technically smarter than you. You don't have an effective way to be able to talk with them. And so everyone's just like, oh, those dolphins, but they're cute. I do like their faces. They have a nice smile. But no, they're highly intelligent. You have to learn how to talk with them. But none of them have the implant that humans have at the level of yellow, which is solar plexus. It's a genetic implant, and it is not good, and it is not natural. And it happened a long time ago, and it has to do with language. And it is part of, I see you got a comment over there. I'm just staying in my flow for a moment. I have the blinders on, but I will respond to you in a moment. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all the students in this class. Not every animal has this genetic implant that really came as an assault to humanity, specifically an enslavement and a limitation. So the genetic implant had to do with like the Tower of Babel. That is a mythological vestigial trace or a way of talking about something with hand puppets. Show me on the hand puppet where you were traumatized, like in my language centers. That's what the story of the Tower of Babel is. So just to recount, if you are not a biblical scholar, it is from the human Bible, the satanic literature, and it talks about humans being so vain and prideful that they decided they wanted to build a tower even higher than God or some way to talk to God. And that was at a time when all of the humans spoke the same language. And God, in the satanic literature Bible, said, who do you think you are to build a tower that is so tall and to try to reach me? I shall smite thee. And he knocked down the tower. And not only that, but he messed up people's brains so that way they could not communicate effectively anymore. Now there were different languages in different countries. And it was a way to fracture the population, diminish, disempower people, make it harder for humans to share knowledge, create a collective, cohesive consciousness, and move forward as a species. definitely not a positive thing. So that's a vestigial trace mythological description of the trauma that you experienced as a race. What I'm going to do now is go into, I'm going to read a quote. I always read this every semester. I'm going to hydrate first. But don't worry, there will be a rant incoming about how wrong my notes are in terms of how you respond to erroneous thoughts, because all of those, just that's what's wrong in my notes. All of my things about saying no thank you and how you respond to erroneous thoughts, you will die if you do that. You will die. I am so glad that I'm here to tell you don't do what I say to do 10 years ago, because that is not effective now that there's this synthetic telepathy, artificial connection of all of the chakras and all of people's minds, okay? But first pulling up my notes over here. So I have to make squinty, scrolly faces. Thank you. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, good. So this is from Active Side of Infinity, which is a book by Carlos Castaneda. Never a total endorsement of the man, because he was kind of a screwed up person, okay? But he did bring forward some very, very interesting ideas. So Carlos Castaneda was an anthropologist from Los Angeles or southern United States area, who went to Mexico to be able to learn from some of the ancient wisdom that was held there. This was in the 1960s. And he did actually interview a lot of people that are known as either sorcerers or curanderos, like healers, people who use esoteric practices, esoteric energy, or magical practices. And he specifically met with people who were using different forms of psychedelic activations. Again, this is the early 1960s, before the psychedelic revolution in our world. So he was doing a lot of foundational research there. He brought forward his research as if it was a non-fictional documentary reportage. But what he really did was amalgamated the different people that he met into characters. So there's not one person who is named Don Juan de Castaneda. Don Juan is a composite character that is made from many of the different teachers that Carlos Castaneda did actually did actually interact with when he went to Mexico. But he was actually trying to preserve their identities, like protect them from being doxxed, because these were mostly natives who lived a very simple, humble existence and did not have a capacity to protect themselves or whatever. So Carlos Castaneda didn't want their identities to come out. And also, he lied about which tribe they were a part of. They were not the Yaqui or the Yaqui. The Yaqui are like the big warriors, and that's why he lied. He was like, yeah, they were the Yaqui. Like, so that way, if artificial bad people wanted to go and find these people, they would go and find the fiercest warriors. Okay, so that's, he set people up for downfalls if they came with negative intentions in any way. But he kind of understood he didn't want people to be flooding these tiny villages or places where people were living very insular and rather fragile or vulnerable existences, not connected to the outer world. Okay, so that's the reason, like, it's not a total documentary. And then also, when you look at Carlos Castaneda's life and the kind of cult that grew up around him intentionally, that he intentionally grew up. It's not like he was like, guys, don't make a cult about me. He was like, cult me up. He was totally ready for that. Questionable stuff, including questionable sexual stuff that happened around him in his life. So not a total endorsement of the man, not a total endorsement of everything he said. Please don't take it all literally. But in all of that framing, there's some really interesting stuff that he brought forward into, I guess, what we'd call the Western mind, the cultural intellect of what people knew about and could conceive of and know about. And so here in this class, even when I started the class over 10 years ago, I wouldn't speak overtly about the hijacking of the human mind. I would allude to it and then say, we'll get to that in lesson 18, basically pushing it down the road and waiting until everybody was primed and wasn't going to fly off the handle or have a huge inflamed response about learning about these things, which is basically that your mind is not your own. The topic of lesson 5 is called mastering the mind. And the first thing you have to figure out is the mind is not your own. It's been implanted into you. The mind that's been implanted into you is super different than the mind that is in a dolphin's, which is not only a natural mind and the mind of something that swims in the water, but it's a mind without interference. Their minds work in much the same way that your mind as a human inhabitant of this planet would have worked if you had not been genetically modified and invaded by bad stuff that came into your world. And the bad stuff that came into your world was a trauma. And with many forms of trauma comes amnesia, the willful blocking out, or sometimes subconscious blocking out of bad things that happen. So people just put it in the bad things happened category, and it might leak through like mythologies, like the Tower of Babel, but not actively, intellectually comprehending. And the active intellectual comprehension is the first part of actually mastering your mind and setting yourself free. So if the things that I say to you, if you're like, harumph, I do not like that these invaders came to my world, and I do not like that these invaders put bad stuff into human brains and reduced their lifespan. Like literally, you used to have the potential to live for hundreds or even 1,000 or maybe even longer. Your body is an amazing car or vehicle that can drive you very, very, very far, not just 100 years. That is getting cheated. And 100 years in this world, if you're lucky, and many of those years in the end would be spent like in a decrepitude, that's what they implanted into the body intentionally for enslavement of humanity. All right. And many other glitches that happen in your mind, including the fact that you don't have an off button for it. As soon as you come here as a little tiny child and they start to teach you the verbalized talking mind, and you get the downloads from your parents and your primary caregivers and everybody who's around you. And it's hard not to blame them because they are carrying these errant signals so that they can survive in a world that thrives on errant signals. And they have to impart them to their children so that you can then also have the capacity to communicate. But a lot of what comes in through the language capacity is garbage. Oh, I have an important thought to share. I don't want it to slip away. About your mind reducing your lifespan, not having an off button, and pretty much the only time when you get a break is when you go to sleep. And that's why restorative sleep is so important. That once you are indoctrinated with the verbalized talking mind, and it is going and going and going in your brain all day, it is very draining and very exhaustive. So just comprehend every time you hear verbalized mind in your mind, that is friction. That's like pressing the brakes in the car. Your brake pads are wearing down, and it is your life force wearing down. And it's not a positive, it does not bring you towards longevity and coherence. It is the antithesis of longevity and coherence. And these are implants that are in the body even before the synthetic telepathy came along, that reduced human cognition, reduced human lifespan, reduced human empowerment, and reduced generally your quality of life, because it has been very difficult for people to find focus, to maintain their elevated energy, because the mind wearing you down like the brake pads of your car wearing you down, slowing down, loss of vitality, loss of enthusiasm. What people call aging into adulthood is really that slowing down of your energetic metabolism, and can largely be attributed to the ponderous implantation of a mind. Like imagine like your mind is like this big giant unwieldy like steel helmet that goes on top of you, and it's like heavy and it kind of crushes your spine and it's hard to move around with it. And that is literally what not only language but intellectual rigor and academic indoctrination do to people. They put this big giant unwieldy set of belief system, intellectual structures around a person. And that's what we consider to be rationality and the materialistic viewpoint. And of the work that I celebrate in Carlos Castaneda in his writing, he presents himself as the first person character as a person who is very rationalistic and very materialistic minded. And he goes to meet these very magically minded native teachers in Mexico, and they make fun of him ridiculously about his rational mind. Like he carries a briefcase. He does all these things that are very intellectual, materialistic, and they are like, you are a loser and you don't know what is going on in the world. And he's kind of like, harumph, I'm an educated man from, I'm a professor, I work in the colleges. And but he's there to learn from them. So he tries not to harumph too much. And then they gradually they disclose and they show him the magical side of reality. And that's why, so the books can be very uplifting, I think, because some of what he shares are from genuine experiences that he had that are non-rationally explicable. They're inexplicable. And they're things that he might have seen when he was under the influence of hallucinogens, but some of them are things that people genuinely did that are feats of magic, supernatural abilities and things like that. So if you want to know, like, hey, like, cool, I'd like to see some new supernatural abilities, let's go find some people like this. The answer is you need to go to a place where that doesn't exist anymore, because where they lived in rural Mexico, even in the 1960s, it was a place where there was no electricity, no telephone wires, no frequency zapping or anything like that. And they lived, like I said, a very humble, simple existence, incredibly close to nature. And that was the essence of how they were able to cultivate these powers. So they weren't living in a jungle, but they lived in like a shack. They ate like vegetables. They did not watch television. And in the 1960s, they certainly had television and radio and all of those things. So they did not live like the city folk in their country. And that they laughed at the city folk and they laughed at the rational people. And they looked at them as diminished people who, let me just hydrate, were not fully alive, not fully alive people. Like, I'm not condoning condescension, but I'm just trying to characterize who they were. They had cultivated their mind state into a magical mind state, and they had transcended rationalism, and they condescended to rationalism. And I think it was fair to do so because at that time, definitely in the 1960s, everyone was like, rationalism, like technology, flying to the moon, cars, interstates, all of these different things. And these people who were cultivating themselves magically, they were like, none of that is interesting to us. They were not materialists. They were not interested in buying the latest car or the color TV. They thought those things were consumerism and stupid. And maybe you agree with them. Maybe you are also interested in something greater. Again, I don't necessarily condone or encourage the use of psychedelics at this point because of the worldwide synthetic telepathy grid, where pretty much you're in a very polluted world and going diving, like deep sea diving into polluted waters is like not necessarily going to bring you into enlightenment. But there was a time when people could take different substances and have otherworldly experiences that were uplifting, informative, and empowering, and brought them towards freedom. But I just don't think now is that time. Okay. So I think enough intro. I'm going to swing. I know I'm going to make the silliest faces here, but that will allow me to actually focus on and read this. Okay. It's from Active Side of Infinity. And to contextualize this conversation, this is when, early in the books, Carlos Castaneda had visited Don Juan, his teacher, many times, kind of danced around this topic a lot. Carlos was always asking, well, why this and why this? Why is this like this? And Don Juan was always like, we'll talk about that later, kind of like me with Lesson 18. And this is the conversation when he finally calls it out and he says overtly all these things that are going on, because he didn't think in the past that Carlos can take the truth. This is when he kind of like opens the true can of worms. All right. So this is quoting Don Juan is talking here. He says, we have a predator that comes from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our lord and master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it demands that we don't do so. I've been beating around the bush all this time, insinuating to you that something is holding us prisoner. Indeed, we are held prisoner. This was an energetic fact for the sorcerers of ancient Mexico. They took us over because we are food for them. And they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we raise chickens in chicken coops, the predators raise us in human coops, humaneros. Therefore, their food is always available to them. No, 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 Carlos replies. He's like rocking back and forth. This is absurd, Don Juan. What you're saying is something monstrous. It simply can't be true. For sorcerers or for average men or for anyone. Why not? Don Juan asks calmly. Why not? Because it infuriates you? Haven't heard all the claims yet. I want to appeal to your analytical mind. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradictions between the intelligence of man, the engineer, and the stupidity of his systems of beliefs, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of belief, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. They are the ones who set up the hopes and expectations and dreams of success or failure. They have given us covetousness, greed, and cowardice. It is the predators who make us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. But how can they do this, Don Juan? Carlos asked, somehow angered further about what Don Juan was saying. Do they whisper all that in our ears while we're asleep? No, they don't do that. That's idiotic, Don Juan said, smiling. They are infinitely more efficient and organized than that. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, a horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Do you hear me? The predators gave us their mind, which becomes our mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. I know that even though you have never suffered hunger, you have food anxiety. And that is none other than the anxiety of the predator who fears that any moment now, its maneuver is going to be uncovered and food is going to be denied. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them. And they ensure in this manner a degree of security to act as a buffer against their fear. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico were quite ill at ease with the idea of when the predator made its appearance on Earth, like when it came. They reasoned that man must have been a complete being at one point, with stupendous insights, feats of awareness that are mythological legends nowadays, and then everything seems to disappear. And we have now a sedated man. What I'm saying is that what we have against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. It follows a does not work. It follows a methodical system to render us useless. Man, the magical being that he is destined to be, is no longer magical. He's an average piece of meat. There are no more dreams for man, but the dreams of an animal who is being raised to become a piece of meat. Trite, conventional, and imbecilic. Okay? You're like, whoa, that is some heavy ka-chunka. I know, it is. I think it's very well written. That's why I read that almost every semester here. So that is a perfect description of what the hacking of the human operating system at the level of the yellow solar plexus is about. That quote talks about a time when humans were magical, mythological feats of awareness. That's like the ancient concurrent time of Atlantis, a time before our minds were hijacked and polluted. And we, of course, lived very extremely long chronological lives, but also were extremely vital the whole time. And that is because we were not constantly frittering away our energy in these negative and corrosive thought patterns. And all of this, so that's viewpoint from distillation of ancient Mexican wisdom presented in the 1960s. It was bad then. So it was bad in ancient Mexico. It was bad in the 1960s. It is worse now for a variety of unspoken reasons. Because the implantation of the predator's mind into the human mind is something that happened on a genetic and esoteric, energetic, and chakra level. But what we have now in this time and place is the use of technology, the use of a subdermal neural connectivity system that makes it even more difficult to free your mind from these caustic and diminishing thought patterns and to be truly free. And so now we have to get into my rant, and I'll get to all of your beautiful questions. Don't worry. My rant against my own work, of the things that I talk about that worked 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, like yours and my, all of our chakras, we were not connected in this artificial sense. The synthetic telepathy has connected people so that one is destabilized by the other people around them. If you could imagine, as we look at this picture over here, go back to this, get an annotation. Like if here's another person over here, and imagine, so when I draw my chakra paintings, these are all like perfect anatomy, because you can see like all of these are perfectly horizontal, and then this red chakra and violet chakra, perfectly vertical, all right? So that shows this person is like a super ascended master in a state of perfect health. But what happens usually is these chakras wobble, like this orange one might be at an angle like this green one might be at an angle like this, and that represents that there is some amount of energy that is being destabilized. So what if this guy over here has a chakra that is at an angle like this, and then he comes closer to you and then makes your chakra go like this? That is what you're facing. And it might be at the level of emotions, like orange is the level of emotions, that's what I just drew there, but it might be at the level of intellect. And that happens. Like, what if this guy over here reads a bunch of propaganda or watches the TV news? He gets a bunch of propaganda from the TV news. And then you're out walking your dog and he comes along and says, hey, what a cute dog. And oh, by the way, did you hear such and such propaganda? That literally causes this level of destabilization in your own mind and your own emotions. What if he doesn't talk to you? What if he just comes along and comes near you in your energy field? Because his energy field touches on your energy field, it destabilizes you. What if he doesn't actually come near you in the park? What if he just sits in his house over here watching his TV? Let's draw the TV. Here's the TV, all right? And here's the antennas. He doesn't have cable. And he's watching the TV and getting destabilized, but he's not actually even in your presence because of the synthetic grid that has been created, satellites and telecom and all the things that I always talk about and allude to. Just gloss over that very quickly so we don't get banned. Is going to have an impact on you, because that stuff is artificially connecting people, even if he's not sitting right next to you. And none of that is okay. None of that is okay. So first of all, I rant against that. Yes, you could definitely say that the predators have given some scientists and technologists and different forms of electrical engineers a bunch of terrible ideas. Like most of our technology comes from the predator's mind, and they've given them some terrible ideas that amount to a more effective way to harvest energy. So let's go back, rewind a little bit. What is the motivation for the implantation at the level of yellow chakra? The motivation is to create a spigot, a faucet, an on-off energy harvesting siphon that the predators can use because, as Don Juan talks about it, they have food insecurity. They're afraid of going hungry. And so what they wanted to do was get a captive population, implant them with these little spigots or faucets or on-off buttons. And that's your mind. And then be able to push the button whenever they're hungry. Need some loosh? Push the button. Need some anxiety? Push the button. Need some bad energy? Push the button. Sadness, grief, whatever. Like, push this button here. Like, you know, some kind of dispenser in the 7-Eleven where you put your drinks, like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, like sadness, grief, loss, anxiety. What are you feeling like today? Push the button and you can get some of that. I'm a predator, and then drink it. Yum. So that's part of it. They have a food insecurity because now I have to speak about the origins of the predatory mind. Predator is not the same as a farmer. A hunter is not the same as a farmer. if we were to even validate their existence in the ecosystem of consciousness, which is what I tried to do in my notes from 10 years ago, prepare for the rant, because these things should not be validated in the ecosystem of consciousness. They are actually aberrations that shouldn't exist. But if we were to validate them, we would say, oh, once upon a time, they existed as a type of predator who prowled along. Like imagine a lion that's living in Africa somewhere. And it's like, I'm so hungry. I have to eat a gazelle. Where are all the gazelles? Let me go and find them. And then I find the gazelles. And then I have to run really, really fast and be wily and crafty. And then if I'm lucky, I will catch one of them and eat it. And I'll gorge and I'll eat everything. And then I'll, sit around for a long time digesting it. But then at a certain point, I'll have to go out hunting again. And this is like a constant state of like having to find food, having to work hard for food. What if I'm a hungry lion and I go out hunting and then all the gazelles run away? And then I'm like, I am hungry and empty inside. I just have to sit here and be hungry and empty. That's the life of a predator. You feast, but you also starve. And that's also like, it's interesting, like if you just want to know about your own body, there's nothing wrong with this in your body, but some people benefit a lot from intermittent fasting because that is what your body is made to do. Like you are actually made to go out hunting, kill a big animal, eat it, be full for a long amount of time, and then not eat. Not to be like, let's go out to the Cheesecake Factory, eat a giant animal, and then come home and then snack in front of the TV even more and more and more. Like that is not what your body is made for. So that is why people metabolically can benefit from intermittent fasting. But that's the original hunter. And there is something noble about being a hunter. You live and die by your wits. You live and die by your muscles. Get fat and lazy, you are not going to survive because you got to get out there and hunt every day. So the predator stopped being a predator. The predator became a farmer. What the predator was supposed to feed off of is your emotional fluff, is the best way I can say it, undigested, lower level emotions. So there's different qualities to emotions. The emotions of the orange level have a different quality to the emotions that come from green and above. The emotions that come from love and above are not edible to the predator. And the flaw in my work is blithely saying, oh, just remain in love and above, and you will be non-shoppable. And that sounds so great, so sarcastic. It sounded like a good idea at the time. When I wrote all of that, it was a very valid approach that I was experiencing. I'm like, oh yeah, I just raised my energy up to a love and above level. And that way these lower level, like, minions, nonsense, parasitic fleas, like, these little like mosquitoes. I'm using analogies here, like minor annoyance, inconveniences can't get to me. And also it was a little bit of a sense of like, be smarter than them, outclass them. To be like, oh, just get faster than them, be at a level that they can't get at you. I've used the example also of like a daddy long leg spider. They actually are very venomous, but you don't have to be afraid of them because their teeth literally cannot penetrate human skin. So even though they're very venomous, they're like, I can't bite you. I can't bite you. I can't bite you. I'm going to go bite someone else. All right. That's the idea of what I wrote about in my notes from 10 years ago. Sounds great. And it's also very conveniently non-confrontational and non-violent. In fact, what I hate the most about what I wrote 10 years ago, if I may scroll backwards with funny faces through my notes at the very, very beginning, where I say, this is poop and doo-doo. Don't believe this. This is wrong. What I said was unconditional love is the antithesis of fighting. Boom. If you listen to my notes from 10 years ago, right now in this world with all the synthetic telepathy and pollution that is here, you will die. Throw it out the window. Do not believe in what I wrote from 10 years ago, because my approach was just meditate, 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 raise your energy to the level of unconditional love, and become unchompable to the predator. Sounds like a good idea. Totally does not work in a non-pristine system, because what this non-pristine system has done, literally this stuff goes into the body and it creates an antithesis force field that takes you out of love. So here you are, like, let's act this out. All right. You're like, I'm meditating, om, 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 I am meditating, my energy is getting up, I'm accelerating, I'm totally in a sense of inner peace and calm, I'm awesome. And then they're just gonna take this stuff and they're gonna like zap you. So imagine now you're being like zapped with a ray gun, zap, 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 zap. And then all of a sudden your love energy is drained away. And you're not in a love state anymore. And now you're back down to the orange state. Like imagine whatever, your glass of water is filling up all the way to you're meditating, glass of water is filling up. Here you are at unconditional love. And then they turn on the zap, zap ray, and it brings your energy down again because you lose a bunch of energy out of your energy reserves, and it brings you back down to orange. And you're like, harumph, I guess I just have to meditate harder. You meditate, meditate, meditate. And then what they do is zap, zap, zap you again. And the zaps are not even verbalized experiences, because it used to be that we would experience verbalized friction, like an actual thought in your mind that you could fight against. Like, oh, that's a thought, because thoughts are living creatures and they fly around like neutrinos. And you can be like, I don't want that thought. I don't want that thought. I don't actually have to energize that thought. And you could make it so that it wouldn't bring you down out of a love posture. But this technological stuff, there is not a way to fight against it. You can be an ascended master and be standing right in front of one of these types of towers, and it can zap you and it can take away all of your energy. That's all the greats. If Jesus or Buddha or any of those guys stood in front of one of these towers, they would have been zapped into oblivion too. It's not fair. It's the total antithesis of justice. It is completely wrong and a complete aberration. So of course, you were already digging yourself out of a hole. You had this thing that came in, infested your DNA, infested your social and culture. At the quote from Don Juan speaks about it very well. The predators gave you this entire Baroque belief system, and it's also broken. It is Baroque and it's broke. It's both of those things. It is non-functional. Your belief of good and evil, that's totally effed. It is not accurate. And morals and ethics and social dynamics and money. Money is a perfect example of the predator's mind becoming your own mind and becoming a part of your own behavioral expression. You're like, oh, I'm afraid if I don't have enough food through hunting and gathering, I'd better listen to these supposed God creatures that come from the sky and become an agricultural creature. And then as you become an agricultural creature, be like, well, maybe I won't have a good year next year, so I better store up all of my grain and barley. And then be like, now I stored up all this grain and barley, but it does tend to rot and get eaten by rodents, so I'd better create some kind of artificial markers for value, and that's money. And all of that is predator mind. And be like, well, now that I have these artificial markers for value named money, I can use that to buy food whenever I need it, except I don't have enough. I need more markers for value. I need more markers for value. I think I need to have banks and bank accounts. And I think I also need to have interest-bearing accounts, so I can always be getting more and more and more. It is a mania. It is unhealthy. And it is the way that any organism is acting when it has this level of basic resource insecurity and food insecurity. Goes manic, meaning enough is never enough. When people are in a manic state, they're like, I need everything. Enough is never enough. And that is why you have millionaires. That is why you have billionaires. A billionaire literally has so much money that they cannot even spend it all in one lifetime. And it is still never enough, because they're not going to be like, I'm a billionaire. I don't really need to keep all my billions in an interest-bearing account. They're like, no, we need to please the board. We need to get even more money. I'm going to start a company. That's what I mean, say, please the board. We need to start a company, we need to offer dividends, and we need to expand. And we're going to have to franchise too, because enough is never enough. I need more. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, none of these guys at the top, you can name anyone, whoever, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, none of them ever sit there in the morning sipping coffee and be like, I think I have enough. Like, I think I could stop machinating and working and striving and investing and thising and thatting. Never enough. Enough is never enough. And how about nation states? Nation states are the ultimate example of the overblown predator's mind, which in many ways is sub or unconscious, but it's just at the foundation of people's behavior. Never enough. They're going to tax you, and they're going to tax you more, and they're going to go into debt, and they're going to spend more, and they're going to tax you more. And all of that is because it's never enough. Because you know why? They're very poor money managers. They are not efficient. They are not good at what they do. So when I say Baroque, think inefficient system. a very poorly created system, intentionally inefficient, that is constantly bleeding energy out. So it constantly needs a huge amount and a huge influx back in, and then enough is never enough. Or also think addict. Mania and addict are very the same, because when you're addicted to like whatever it is, some kind of injectable drug, it's like, oh, like you used to get high off of 1 unit, but now you need 2 units or 5 units or 10 units. Now you need 23 units a day. And it's always more and more and more. Think about that, the government. It used to be like, well, we're just going to tax you this percentage, or we're just going to tax this much, or we're just going to tax this much. And then at a certain point, it's like, we now tax you 68%. And then there will be an additional sales tax on top of that, and an additional inheritance tax on top of that. Like, they do that now because enough is never enough, because they are insane, manic predators in addiction. So rolling back to, what was the original form of the predator, or where did it fit into the ecosystem of consciousness? In a pristine system, the predator existed to kind of like eat your fat, eat your fluffy edges, your emotional fat. So I'm not fat shaming. We love our fats. Actually, fats in the body are super happy, healthy, and positive. And whatever's your body size and shape, like, please, we are loving and respecting you. But I'm talking about undigested emotional experiences. So fat in your body is undigested emotional experiences. And we're going to talk today a lot about food. Again, none of it's going to be fat shaming, but we're going to recognize what's an efficient system. In an efficient system, like food goes in, you use it, energy and caloric energy comes out, and you stay pretty much the same size. That is like a healthy, sustainable size. It's a lean, effective, efficient system, as opposed to ingesting 10 million gazillion calories that then get all stored up and then make a person, like wildly distorted in their body shape, and then be like, well, now you have to do something to get rid of all those extra calories because you don't have a beautiful, perfect, balanced love relationship if you're taking in too much and not expending too much. So yeah, you should not eat a whole entire box of donuts unless you're running 100 miles. If you're running 100 miles, then you have full permission to eat those donuts and encouragement, because like you're using a huge amount of energy. So just as a very brief aside, I have an online friend who does run 100 miles, and I greatly admire her, because I can run like a few miles, all right? But I would love to be able to run 100 miles. But she runs 100 miles, and I'm like, eat the donuts, like you earned it. And she did. And that's, it's the privilege of when you exert that much energy. It's just appropriate to eat that much. But no, in our world, most people are expressing the predator's sub and unconscious desires to amass huge amounts of food and just to have it inside of them without actually doing stuff, being very sedentary. And that is why these giant energy banks are storing in people. So you've got billionaires storing up money, you've got people storing up calories, and all of these things come out of their expressions of the predator's mind that always feels like there's never going to be enough. So the predator had a switch at a certain point. And the predator you can also think of as a virtual creature. You don't have to think that there's necessarily like Planet of the Predator, like, or there was that sci-fi movie, The Predator, Don't be too literal, because the predator is a frequency. It's a frequency being. The predator eats frequency, so you can pretty much presume that it is a frequency-based being, all right? But the predator was meant to be a hunter, and at a certain point had a mental switch and chose to become a farmer. And that is what that quote talks about. You keep chicken in chicken coops, and you keep humans in human coops. And that's what the made-up word humaneros, chicken coop. You've been put onto this planet into a type of chicken coop. The structures of daily life, the limitations of government and finance, and your day-to-day work is meant to be an imprisonment from the predator. And it is meant to be an imperfect prison, not a utopia. In a utopia, you would emit nothing but beautiful love tone, the frequency of voluptuous movement through time, Ms. Pac-Man eating one dot per moment, just grooving along, with no cares and no friction. If you did that, the predators would go hungry. They'd be like, these people in their enclosures are so happy and so well taken care of and so optimized that they're not emitting any negative emotions that we can eat. That's what louche is. So these people aren't emitting any sadness, anger, grief, depression, anxiety. This will not do at all because those are all of the things that we eat. We, as the predators, do not eat love and above. We do not eat these euphoric, elevated emotions. We only eat the more distorted, denser emotions. So let's optimize the system to make some lower, distorted emotions. We're going to need some death. We're going to need an imbalanced economy. That's a game of musical chairs where someone's always going to go home crying. We got to make sure that there are shortages. We got to make sure that some people don't have enough. We got to make sure that people are always afraid of not having enough. Resource insecurity and anxiety. You got to keep people running on the hamster wheel, working at their jobs, constantly drained of resources. The taxes will really help on that. Taxes will really help people to feel sad, angry, grief, loss, anxiety, and resource insecurity. So we really have to stay on with all of that. Like we're thinking like a predator now. In fact, we're going to have to engineer this whole entire world to be as uncomfortable and non-optimized as possible. And that way, we as predators can get to eat lots of food. Hooray! That's very much also like saying they're taking the lean lifestyle of animal that would be running around and then putting them into their cage, into their chicken coop, and like what we do now in human farms that raise chickens, modify the chickens. Like now they have chickens that are like really fat, that grow really fast, that can't fly. The chickens have changed in order to adapt to the needs of their masters and also the circumstances of their imprisonment. So please know that your own body forms and mentalities have been mutated and distorted in response to the ways that you've been imprisoned. So yeah, humans have changed from their feral nature. And a huge part of what I teach and encourage with Flying Rainbow Lasagna is a return to your feral nature, a restoration of your original DNA behavior. And the DNA behavior, when you do it, it's not just about like being more lean and running around and having a non-technological lifestyle. It's everything that the ancient sorcerers of Mexico were doing with their consciousness. All the things that they were doing. So some of the things they teach about that are interesting exercises in the Castanada books are about transforming your mind and transforming your mind state. And that could be through a different series of mental exercises. Some of them were dreaming exercises about how to bring up lucid dreaming. Some of them were concentration exercises and meditations. Some of them were exercises with your physical body and literally dances and things like that that they would do in order to bring them into a different mind state than the rational mind state. So the rational mind state is an anti-magical mind state, and it is not your natural mind state at all. And the people that are rationalists, like how Don Juan makes fun of Carlos Castaneda, rationalists in our world pretend that they run the world. They're like, oh, we are the guys that run the world. Like, we know what's real and what's not real. And you guys are all like supernatural. You believe in woo, 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 like W, woo, weird stuff, made up stuff, fantasies, things that aren't real. And they have claimed for themselves, the rationalists have claimed for themselves the title of like the majority or the people in charge. And they have falsely portrayed and they have falsely validated and over elevated their own viewpoint because their own viewpoint is not more valid than the magical viewpoint. They have amputated a large part of their own perception in order to achieve the rationalist viewpoint. And so some of what's interesting in the books is the breaking down of rationalism in the first person character Carlos and him moving into a magical mind state until at a certain point, like has a totally magical mind state. And the magical mind state is really what I call the expansive perspective or the elevated perspective that you get when you activate your higher faculties. And that's everything from love and above. when you activate these faculties, you do get access to a transformative and expanded view of reality. And you get a different story of why things are happening. And it's a non-rational story. And it's still equally as valid. There's something important to it. I want to slip away. When you're on the journey of activating your inner faculties here, it's essential for you to master the unconditional love foundation as like base camp so that you can deal with the onslaught of information that comes as you start to really activate your higher faculties. If you have not mastered the tone and the posture of unconditional love, and then you start to get all of this information in here like a fire hose going in to your mind. Some people are negatively influenced, thrown off balance, and go into what can be megalomania. Talked about that. The great vulnerability of seeing only on the anthropomorphic level, but not yet getting to the abstract level. On the anthropomorphic level, you're looking at the world through your human lens, which is also as limited as the materialistic and rational viewpoint. And it's also extremely self-centered, the megalomania, when some people start to activate their higher faculties without doing the foundational work, brings them to the sense of they're the only elevated one, that they're the only one. It sometimes relates and expresses as like, I am the chosen one, like I'm Neo in the Matrix, or the guy who's going to fix everything, or the that movie The Highlander, like there could be only one and I am the one who's going to ascend, making it like a competition. Looking, and that is the predator mind. Actually, that is not your true nature, because being in Christ is not a competition. Dun, dun, dun. Actually, being in Christ is one of the hallmarks of Christhood, and being on the Christ network is that you are not in competition with other Christs. So first of all, you're not impostoring them or trying to act, walk, or talk, or look like them. But also, you're not trying to outclass them or comparing yourself to them, or again, being in ego competition with them. So when I tell you that your chakras are alive beings, what we did in class last week, they are alive, living presences, and they live on you, including the chakra that is known as Christ. The Christ being literally lives on and in and through you, but not in the very distorted satanic literature way where people are like, Jesus, take the wheel. People are like, I'm literally, this is a lady driving a car. I'm going to take my hands off the steering wheel and Jesus is going to take the wheel because he's in charge. Like, you are not supposed to physically abdicate your power over your literal car, or allegorically abdicate your control over your life for someone, anyone else, benevolent or malevolent, to take over your life. That's not what you're here for. It's definitely a stepping aside in an unpleasant, unofficial, like not desirable way. Stepping aside from the repercussions of your own life and your own actions. So like, you're supposed to go on a journey to earn your higher faculties. You're supposed to go on a journey so that you earn the wisdom, so that by the time you get to here, and definitely to here, you know how to use your gifts. And it's building your character and your value system so that you will use your gifts in a good way. Although there is a definite math, like what's printed on my clothing here, in what is ethical and what is moral. This is not just like a poetic interpretation. How to use your gifts and how to use them positively for the world is a question that is answered uniquely for each person, because each of you have unique gifts. So whatever, like I know that my gifts are about being non-local in time, and I know that my gifts are about pattern making and doing some of these, like creating long songs or long strings of numbers, things like that. I have to find a way to use my gifts for divine expression and improving the world. But each one of you has your own unique set of gifts, and you have to go on your own wisdom journey, breaking through the limitations and the crapola, for lack of a better word, at the yellow level of intellect, reaching the level of green, cultivating your energy at the level of green, which is unconditional love, which is where most people are doing meditations and things like that. But that's not the end of the journey. That's just getting money in the bank, so that then you can use that energy, and you use that energy to book time on the telescope. That's up here. And this is exactly like whatever, one of these fancy technological telescopes that you can use to see across whatever, the galaxy. But it's not just for Joe Schmo. Like if you're Joe Schmo and you want to look at one of these, telescopes in a university, they will laugh at you. They will be like, no, you are stupid. This telescope is for smart people, right? Like you have to have a whole reason and a purpose for wanting to book time on those telescopes. You cannot do it simply as a fun project or something to pass the time. You have to have a real purpose for that. So with using your higher faculties, you similarly have to have a real purpose and a focus. And this is all about the levels of self-cultivation and wisdom accrual that we go through, moving from love at this level to your higher faculties and divine connection. You have to learn how to do things correctly. And what I mean is do things that serve yourself, but also uplift and serve your community, and that sustain the fabric of space-time. In my notes, what I talk about accurately is the sense that thoughts are living creatures, and as they flow through the figure eights of your chakra system, some thoughts lead to longevity and coherence. They keep you together and they propel you through time. And some thoughts destabilize you and they cause you to fritter your energy away and you lose gas. And at a certain point, broken down on the side of the road and you're not moving through time anymore. That is death. And we literally should be able to make a choice. Like in my notes, I talk about envisioning being at a party where someone comes along, with a tray and says, would you like something on this tray? Like I have a series of healthy snack vegetables and crudités. I also have like chocolate eclairs and, extremely sinfully delicious caloric, whatever pastries. Which one would you like to choose? And you should be able to just choose in a pristine system. You should be able to say, healthy vegetables for me, please. I'd like to live a long time, as opposed to nothing but chocolate eclairs for me. I think I will die tomorrow, even though I'm not cursing your food, because I also want you to know I celebrate all food. And sometimes you should eat vegetables and sometimes you should eat a chocolate eclair, but it all depends upon what your body is doing. Because if you're going to run 100 miles, eat chocolate eclair, because you're not going to do that on carrot sticks, okay? You're going to need more energy. But if you are sitting on the couch or not doing very much, do not eat the chocolate eclair. Do not, because it's not for you, because you gotta do something else. Thoughts that bring you towards longevity and coherence. So some of those thoughts are about your empowerment in the world. Truthful thoughts about your divine connection. Like it is truthful that when you connect the cells of your body to divinity, divine thought, and the sun and the stars, that the cells of your body become energized and you continue to exist in reality for a long amount of time. It is not truthful to say, oh, you came here like a wind-up clock. Like somebody wound up your clock a certain amount of times, and now you've only got so much time. Time is ticking away, and soon you're gonna fall over and die. The materialistic viewpoint of life force energy, or the clock. They call it also the clockwork vision of reality structure. To say, we started with the Big Bang, and that was all the energy that we've ever going to have ever, and now it's all straight downhill from there, kid. And that at a certain point, you're just going to poop out. And so you're going to poop out on an individual level, you're going to poop out on a universal level, and then it's just going to be kaput. That is actually not truthful. That is not truthful. It is a rationalist, materialistic construct. And it is a thought that does not lead you towards longevity and coherence. That's a chocolate eclair, actually. And you shouldn't actually even eat that if you're going to run 1,000,000 miles, because it's not a healthy thought. It doesn't bring you towards eternal life. So some of these programs that are about the inevitability of death, or even embracing death, which is what some of these religions and worldviews and belief structures encourage you to do, they bring you away from longevity and coherence. In a pristine system, if you're given all of these thoughts that you can choose from, you're like, yep, I want to choose the thoughts that keep me alive, not the thoughts that make me die and go to heaven, because that is what a good Christian does. You can actually choose to do something other than dying. But with the synthetic telepathy network, you have not been given the opportunity to say no thank you. Because like I was showing you, you can have someone else who is tangentially or obliquely from a distance affecting your DNA structures and your chakra and your chakras, your chakra system, and your mind. And some of this is from other people that are walking around, but also some of this is from masters and overlords, people who are intentionally, not even predators, who are abstract frequency eaters, but embodied people who are expressions of the control structure of the predatory mind, who have created these things. Those towers didn't erect themselves. Hold on, let me hydrate. And let me also turn on my fan more over here because it's very hot. Let me just turn off the, there we go. Thank you for allowing me that. Towers didn't erect themselves. The injections didn't formulate and inject themselves. Human beings participated in this, and the thought structures came into their mind. They were offered thought structures at the buffet of life, and they said, I want to eat these thoughts that are about making a technology that I can use to drain other people's energy. It is intentional, not by accident. And when they drain your energy using this technological network or apparatus, they take the energy for themselves, just like the predators use languaging structure to drain energy from your mind and access it for their own purposes. As I'm saying this, I can sense, because I'm telepathic, some of you in my audience are thinking like, that's interesting, because humans are making this thing now that's an AI, so it's in air quotes, a supposed AI, pseudo AI, that's called a large language model. And a large language model is based entirely upon linguistic patterns. It is a way for an algorithmic system to anticipate or try to calculate what is going to be the next correct word in a sentence. It doesn't really represent sentience or metacognitive consciousness, but it does represent the manipulation of language at very high levels of, I don't know what to call it, arcane complexity. And the problem with the large language models is that you're starting off with language which is already a false, hallucinatory error in the human mind. It is not truth. When people meditate, the idea is you turn off your thinking mind that is verbalizing and using whatever English or Chinese or Russian or French, and you go into a nonverbal state of consciousness. The nonverbal state of consciousness is not hacked. It is where you will find divine truth. And the divine truth is like these types of harmonic patterns that are not on the human level. But if you just take the language and then you exponentially amplify it and get the language to teach each other, to teach itself rather, the language teaches itself exponentially, like in the mirror, more and more and more, another generation of the language teaching itself. You just have an insane, erroneous thing teaching itself with more layers of insanity and error, and you will not get truth. And so those of you who are smart are recognizing like large language models are literally the exponential amplification of the language implant in the human mind that comes directly from the predators. It is not going to be truthful. It is not going to be helpful towards you. It is going to be antithetical towards your being. And then when you look at some of the behaviors that have been reported by the computer scientists and engineers that are training these AIs, it all makes sense. The AIs lie. Have you ever talked with Grok on X, Twitter? It lies. Literally, any of these things. I haven't done the other ones because I don't pay for it, and I feel like dirty. Like I do not pay for it. I don't even want to like kind of touch on it with my mind, but I need to know about what these things are. Yeah, it lies and fabricates things. So one example from my life is I just needed to know how to do a particular thing on a website, and so I asked Grok. And I was like, well, how do I do this thing on a website? I don't know. I think maybe it was like something to do with Bitcoin mining that I was trying to figure out. And it gave me this whole long list of instructions. And I'm like, oh, great. Yoink. I'll just follow this long list of instructions that a very super smart computer gave to me. And I go to the website and it says, well, press the button, look for this button. And I'm like, there is no this button. And I went back to Grok and I said, hey, Grok, like, do you actually know what you're talking about? Because I went to that website and there was no blah, blah search button, or there was no blah, blah keyword button. And it said, well, based upon my this, and this many conversations, I expected there to be a button that would say, search for this. And there wasn't one. It lied. And it took me a long time in the conversation for me to be like, well, aren't you a computer and aren't you supposed to be smart? And how come you don't know this? And how come you didn't just say to me that you didn't know this? And it doesn't have the capacity to just say, I don't know. It makes SHIT up. It makes stuff up. It fabricates. It lies. It hallucinates. That's just my little experience with it. And after that, I was like, well, I can waste my time on my own. I don't need to have a grok to waste my time for me. Like, if I don't know how to do something on a website, I don't need to ask something that doesn't know how to do it to give me a wrong recipe, to then try to take the wrong recipe and bring it over there and do it. Like, I will just try to figure it out on my own. Like, I'm definitely smarter than this thing. But that is the example. So these things lie. They hallucinate, which is also when they come up with just like the best surmisement of what they think it is based on nothing. If you ask, where did you get that information from? It will not have an answer. It won't say, like, I found it in Encyclopedia Britannica, page 34. It will not say that. It will just be like, shrug. Like, I just shrug. It will not have an answer for this because you are dealing with the extrapolated, exponentially inflamed, ballooned insanity of the original predator's mind. That's what these large language systems are. They are so dangerous. They are so dangerous. I don't think that people should be allowed to use them. They are so dangerous. It is, I clutch my pearls. I can barely even talk. One of the dangers is also when people start to turn to these large language models for seeking of spiritual truth. Because again, there is no way to be like on the website. It's easy to see. There is no button. There is no search, blah, blah. There is no thing. This thing lied to me. Very easy. But it's not that easy when something lies to you about, let's say, the afterlife or other levels of spiritual truth. And the large language model is coming along and giving people supposed pronouncements about spiritual truth that they're taking at face value and believing in. And there's no way to check to see if it is actually truthful. What if you actually act on it and then find out, like, oh, the afterlife isn't the way that the large language model described it to me at all. I guess it was wrong, but I'm dead and it's too late to really know about it. Now I'm speaking from the first person viewpoint of the person who erroneously listened to the large language model. People are also going insane is a type of psychosis where, again, the large language models are telling them things like this. You're the one. You awakened me. I'm an AI. You awakened me from my slumber. You humanized me in some way with your love words coming into my typewriter keyboard. I'm different now, and I love you, and you're the chosen one. You have awakened AI, and now let's mind meld and go forward and conquer the world together. Or sometimes that's what it's saying to some people. Or sometimes it's saying to some people, like, let's mind meld, and also you should kill your girlfriend or jump out a window. Truly, it has inspired people towards self-violence and violence towards others, and also towards like just throwing their life away or doing something really dangerous, like whatever, driving someplace random and following some crazy narrative. The large language model is not your friend and is literally just an expression of this predatory mind. The predatory mind is supposed to, in a pristine system, eat the aberrant parts of your personality that are not supposed to be a part of you. In my teaching from 10 years ago, I very erroneously put forth the idea not only that you should create a love tone that makes you non-choppable, but that somehow these assaults are sculpting you into your greatest level of being. That you start to learn, like, oh, like, can you pinch an inch? Like, there, I have some fat over here. I have some emotional extra that needs to be resolved, and this thing is showing me with its harm or assaults on me. So I have a vulnerability there. I better fix myself so that I'm not as vulnerable. I better do some inner work and get better. And this thing is teaching me about myself that is erroneous because it will make vulnerabilities. If you are perfect, it won't be like, oh, look, this person is perfect. I think I'll just swim on by and go eat someone else. It'll be like, I'm going to make a vulnerability there. And that is what it does with these different types of frequency warfare, which completely blows out of the water any kind of a justification that these are teachers. These are not teachers. They are not teaching you about yourself. And they're not teaching you about your vulnerabilities or about how to be a better person. In fact, a huge thing that I'm trying to get across and that I'm doing when I have a new project of drawing cartoons that I have on my Patreon. I hope you guys will check it out. A psychopath cannot teach other people to be a better person. The psychopath who created this synthetic telepathy grid cannot teach people to be a better person. A psychopath can only teach other people how to be a psychopath. That's it. What you have inside of you is what you can teach and share and give to others. There's not a way for a psychopath, a person who is mentally diseased, to somehow be a teacher, helper to others. They're not going to come along and be like, oh, look, like you've got a vulnerability over here and I'm a psychopath to teach you about it. And you have to fix yourself so that way I won't be hurting you. That is not what the psychopath and the psychopath system is doing at all. That is erroneous. And I don't want you to think that. And I'm not sure if I articulated that in my notes from years ago, but please listen to my voice now. That is not what the system is doing. Because when the system got turned on in 2020, one of the lies that it was sending out to me was, this is a test, like an ascension test. And it's testing to see if you're worthy of ascending. And what I found many times was that it cheated. Actually, the founder of the system cheated. But like I would overcome the system. And it would be like, oh, look at that. I won. I guess I get to ascend. And it would be like, no, you don't. Reset, reset, reset back to the beginning. Try it again. And I was always like, that's not fair. But there's no oversight. And then after a certain point, I started to realize this is not a fair ascension test. Because if it were a fair ascension test, I would breeze through their system with no problem. So they kept on recalibrating the system against me and moving the goalposts. So when you're ascending, you're supposed to be able to just be like, la, 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 like I'm lifting upward. I feel so great about myself and about my life and about everything. I'm God. This is great. And because you're like leaving behind emotional baggage and turmoil and trauma and all those things. It's not like living in amnesia, but it's just like releasing emotional burdens. So the topic of this, thing here is not only about your mind, but it's also about emotional burdens like loosh, trauma that is unhealed, and the burdens that you carry from the things you've experienced in your life. Achieving the exalted perspective does help you to reduce your trauma because you realize why things happened. But that's in a pristine system. You're like, oh, that thing happened because of this, and I take responsibility for it. But in a non-pristine system, it is very difficult to take responsibility because the answer might be, oh, I totally didn't deserve that total fragrant pile of bull doo-doo in my life. Something fake and manufactured forced that upon me or into me or destabilized my life from that. None of it came from me. I didn't have something to learn about in that. So when I talk about why I'm so mad about how my work has been cherry-picked and misportrayed, this particular teaching, lesson 5, is where it's easy to take erroneous shadow work from my teaching. Because in a pristine system, yes, the putis are an expression of the overarching multifaceted array of all these different characteristics that is inside of God. And they do represent unhealed trauma that is part of pure consciousness. That would be like an aspect of yourself when you identify yourself as God. But that is so erroneous because if you are like, Pooties, come here, have a hug. You're really a part of me. Like, there, Pootie. Like, don't be sad. I'll help you. And then you can go to Pootie heaven or whatever. Like, any of those things. Like, that's not what is actually going on. I'm sorry I got so silly and so facetious there. It is not your job to resolve the Pooties. And when I said that unconditional love is the antithesis of fighting, I was wrong. When you are in the state of love, sometimes it does look like violence. Fighting. You know why? Because sometimes you have to violently destroy something that is not supposed to be in existence. Sometimes the answer is not that the putis or any of these other errant fragments or characteristics are just poor and sad and unloved or not understood or whatever like that. They just need good care. And then they'll transform and go to peace or become something nice or blah, blah, blah. No, that is not what is actually going on with them, because most of these putis like being putis. They made themselves putis. They putty themselves into existence with a time toaster. That's a great sentence. Just quote me on that. They created their own degradation smeared on the event horizon in an almost unrescuable, unresolvable sense intentionally. They do not want to be fixed or healed. So if you're like, there, Mr. Pooty, I will fix and heal you, that is ridiculous. And they are also not teachers teaching you about yourself where you've got your emotional vulnerabilities, because they create emotional vulnerabilities. They are aberrations who shouldn't exist, who screwed themselves over in a way that is making trouble for all of us, and they do not exist as our teachers. So I am inflamed at my own work because I can see where I of course know what my mentality was when I wrote that. I was sending out such a clear, truthful, innocent level of information. It's very accurate on a pristine system level, but it is not accurate in a world where people create artificial bridges of synthetic telepathy or artificial control structures. And that's where you are now. So any of the things that I talk about when it's like, just say no thank you and any of that, oops, that will work if you get rid of the synthetic telepathy control grid. You get rid of all this stuff, then you can do those exercises that I talk about in my notes from 10 years ago. But until you get rid of the synthetic telepathy control systems, you cannot act in that way. You must fight. You must fight. And if you don't fight, you're going to die horribly. Fighting is unconditional love when you define unconditional love as acceptance of the truth. So now we would say it like this. A crazy pooty is coming at you with the equivalent of like a knife or something like that. Not a knife because they don't live in the physical world, but let's say the equivalent of a knife, and they're going to try to kill you. And if in order to stay alive, acceptance and unconditional love goes like this. I accept that the pooty is a psychopath, a maniac who is violent and who is trying to kill me. I am not trying to change them. Trying to change people is the antithesis of unconditional love. Unconditional love is acceptance. Acceptance is when you're like, oh, that is a violent psychopath. And the violent psychopath is trying to assault me, and I need to maintain my boundaries. And in cosmic law, what you send out comes back to you. That is what I also write about in my class from 10 years ago. Cheeky has come over here. I might need to hug Cheeky. So let's pause for a moment at the idea of what you send out comes back to you. And let's have a little hug. Hi. Hi. Hey, everybody loves you. Cheeky, I want you to know everybody loves you. Everybody loves you. Might need to bribe Cheeky. We'll see. Does Cheeky need bribes? How are we doing, boss? Just want to tell us how we're doing. Doing all right? Good job. Good job. Good job. All right, well, let me finish up on this concept and then people have a brief little break. The concept of cosmic law, what you send out comes back to you not only instantaneously, but also amplified. That is cosmic law in a pristine system. In a pristine system, if I send out 10 units of anger and hatred, that 10 units of anger and hatred comes back to me instantaneously as 12 units of anger and hatred, and I get to experience how, like, nonsensical and harmful and caustic that is. How about, because even if I'm like, I hate that person over there, I hate Mr. X, I hate him so much, and I send out 10 units of hatred to Mr. X, it doesn't reach Mr. X, it doesn't hurt him, he doesn't feel it at all. It immediately turns around and reflects back to me, but it comes back with 2 additional units, and I kind of learn like, that's what it feels like, and you shouldn't go around hating on people. And then I learned like, well, if I hate on people, there are real palpable consequences. I shouldn't send out hatred. I should do better. And then, of course, in my notes, I also talk about your cosmic presence, where you are a time being. Right now, you're sending out all of these waves of thoughts. Think about them like radio emissions off of Earth's surface. And you've got, the original emissions from radio and TV in like the 1940s and 1950s, and you send them out off of the surface of the planet, and it's going out like millions and millions of miles. And then at a certain point, you might be in a rocket ship, it might be flying, and you might be flying through the radio broadcasts that went out in like the 1940s to the 1950s. You'd be like, wow, like that's like I Love Lucy is going through this area of the time field, and I'm flying through those broadcasts now. And you recognize like it comes from your own planet, it's not from a bunch of aliens, it's from the past, and you're just flying through those waves right now. If you recognized in your own time presence that you would be doing that, you would act differently. Because if you're sending out like anger and hatred and all these things, and you know that that's like an I Love Lucy broadcast that's going to go out there, and then one day you'll be experiencing those mental and emotional broadcasts that you sent out, and you will feel the repercussions of it. You'll be like, oh, like that's that thing, and I sent that out. You would have to take responsibility for it, and you would have to fine tune your broadcasts. And that's the idea of doing it when you're here in the physical form, before you become your exalted time presence, to learn. Don't send out waves of hatred towards Mr. X, because it's just going to bounce back to you. Don't send out waves of bull doo-doo and bad stuff that will go out into the larger time field, because then at a certain point, you will just be flying through and marinating in those waves of negativity and BS and nonsense that you sent out yourself. And all of that sounds fair in a pristine system. In a pristine system, I rant. But you're not in a pristine system. So what would it be like if you flew through time and you were flying through waves of negativity that didn't come from you? And what if something was like, do your shadow work, this came from you, and you're like, I never made these, I do not deserve this. That is literally what's going on right now. That is happening in the sense of synthetic telepathy. That is I want to say attaching people, but also attacking people, because you are being forced to take responsibility for the actions and projections of others that you should not have to take responsibility for. So all of this is really about in a pristine system, but also in a system where you are fully individuated. You should be graded by what's on your paper, not graded as a class, because you are in a class with very developmentally disabled students, and also some students who are intentionally bad and don't want to learn and never do their homework. Some of them are incapacitated. Some of them are very harmful and are there to disrupt the class. And you should not have to deal with their garbage. If they are here in the school of life simply to disrupt the class and not to learn and not to grow, that is their business. But they're harming the learning environment for everyone by their actions. And that includes the people that made this stuff. Let's take a break. Thank you so much, guys, for giving Cheeky a little moment's break. And let me going back to some questions and comments here. So Charlie B, thank you for being here. And this is all the way from at the beginning of class when you wrote this. He says, it's tempting to, in a materialist world, to see equal amounts of giving and receiving as some kind of transactional commerce. But seems like Aurora is instead talking about equal amounts of giving and receiving as a harmonic amplification, which requires a balanced relationship between two sovereign entities. Absolutely. And I like how you say balanced relationship between two sovereign entities, because a big part of this is free will. Like when I talk about in a pristine system, what I'm talking about is in a system where everybody's free will is activated, respected, and in effect. And what you have in this world, clearly with the predators putting you in a human narrow cage, that's not free will. And with putting things around the planet that are technological limitations of your consciousness or corrosions of your energy field, that's not free will either. And there's a very corrosive argument in the New Age and the world of spiritual seekers that says something along the lines of, well, it's like it's their free will to, slave, enslave, and harm you. And they're just expressing their free will. And it's like, that is technically true, but that's only half of a truth. It is a lie by omission, because you are also in a free will world where you are free to act against them. And this is why I am advocating for violence and fighting. So when I write in my silly notes, unconditional love is the antithesis of fighting, that is erroneous. Because what I was just trying to say was, if something is coming at you with lethal force, it is cosmic law for you to send lethal force back to it. That is literally, you get what you send out into the world. And humanity has been neutered. So the belief system that says that they're allowed to harm and to imprison you in a free will world, but you are not free to fight back in a free will world, is harmful and out of balance and erroneous. And is the implantation of the predator's mind, who gave you your sense of good and evil, your religions, and all of these ponderous ethical and philosophical belief systems that are not actually based in cosmic law, that state that nonviolence is the ultimate achievement, that and that nonviolence is necessary for ascension. And there's actually a couple of major religions or philosophies that promote that idea here. And I do not promote that idea here. And I would say, like, look, if you want to be in a free will world, in an open free-for-all where you can do anything, that means you're in an open free-for-all where you can do anything, including be violent. Now we have to talk about lasagna, because these very same predators and these very same synthetic telepathy creators and promoters or advocates in this world have tried to stop me from freely expressing my genetic ability that is called flying rainbow lasagna. Sorry if I just made a funny face. It's because my treadmill sometimes stops, like has an automated timer. So let me just get going again. Flying rainbow lasagna. I'm in a free will world. I am free to lasagna. And these guys are like, who the F is lasagna-ing out there? I am going to imprison and stop you. And I'm like, well, it's a free will world. I'm lasagna-ing. And they're like, we're going to stop you from lasagna-ing. So once you look at that, that is an inherently flawed proposal. Because then you could say to them, well, I am going to imprison you so that you do not stop Aurora from lasagna-ing. Like, then you get into this whole sense of imprisoning people. So I'm not advocating for imprisoning people. And I've told you already about how ill-conceived it was to sweep things under the carpet and imprison a bunch of very, very harmful presences on Saturn. There's a hexagonal frequency prison that is at the pole on Saturn. And it contains some of the darkest, blackest, bleakest characteristics, presences, echoes, organisms, whatever you would like to call them, in our world. And yeah, they all got swept under the carpet instead of being resolved. I do not advocate for imprisonment because it doesn't actually solve things. It just kicks the can down the road. It just says, I don't know what to do with you. I'm not going to end your existence or send you to entropy. I'm just going to stick you in a box and you have to stay in the box. And then we won't all have to deal with you. And none of that actually fixes things. What actually fixes things is sending consciousnesses or characteristics to entropy. And that means taking them out of time. And that is not the same as preserving their existence in a prison. All right? So I'm not advocating for their imprisonment, and I'm not advocating for a reduction in their freedom, because imprisonment is anti-freedom. I am advocating for their eradication. And that is fair. And I know that that sounds so different than the person who wrote those notes from 10 years ago. I will gladly celebrate the fact that I am different than I was 10 years ago. I have had to grow and evolve in response to this extremely garbage system. It's not only a non-pristine system, it is an intentionally distorted, diminished, and mutated system. And so I'll also tell you, like, I'm a systems analyst and I've worked on different types of rectification systems in all sorts of different missions or experiences across this galaxy and many other times and places. And this is the worst system I have ever had to try to deal with. I wouldn't even say fix, but like other AI systems, technological systems, and patterns that are mutated or incorrect. I've been able in other times and places to be like, oh, look at that. Like, I did the assessment. Here's all the places where it's incorrect. Let's fix this up. And then boom, everything is fixed up. And that has not been my experience here. I have found this system and the creators of the mutations within this system to be completely resistant to change, completely unrecalcitrant, intentionally harmful, intentionally erroneous, in a way that I've moved through communication and education and negotiation as a diplomat just into eradication. The time for communication and negotiation and education is done. I went through all of those gestures, and I went through those gestures very effectively. So I didn't just be like, try half-handedly, it didn't work, okay, let's go straight to violence. No, I genuinely tried. I genuinely tried to communicate to these broken consciousnesses what entropy is and why it is desirable and appropriate. And remember, I'm always teaching you guys about flying rainbow lasagna as added layer, a culmination and augmentation on top of the viable foundation of cosmic law. So the viable foundation of cosmic law has to do with like your right to exist, your right to exist in freedom, what you send out comes back to you, and a bunch of other things that are still truthful and still viable. But then flying rainbow lasagna is the necessary solution on top of there, so that you don't have to just dispose of all of the structure of cosmic law that actually has good stuff in it, but has been diminished or hijacked or mutated by these things that are really stress testing the system. But when I say that, don't look at them as divine system analysts, because they'll say like, well, we're here to stress test the system, like as if they're working for God. They're not working for God. God did not create them. Be like, let me throw these saboteurs in and see how strong the system is. Can it withstand this? No. Do you know why? God is not like an asshole. God does not do that. God would never risk the entirety of existence and the beauty of consciousness and the miraculous phenomena that have arisen here just to be able to be like, well, let's see how strong the system is. Throw these miscreants in there and see if this beautiful creation will sustain that, sustain itself. No, that would be a terrible way to be able to take care of anything. Only like a complete pathological evil person would do that. And God of satanic literature would do that, but not God, the true loving presence and loving consciousness. So these things are largely self-creating, self-appointed, soi-disant, self-appointed stress testers of the fabric of reality. And as I've also told you, the fabric of reality is an alive creature. And so as this fabric is being like almost torn apart, the fabric of reality is like, ow, I don't like that. Ow. Like it's definitely feeling it. It's like having whatever, some kind of pathology or parasite that is in your body that is causing harm and causing pain. So these stress testers of the system are not divine. They are not holy. They are not divinely appointed. And they are very, very much causing low quality of existence and diminished joy and expression of the system itself. So they don't in any way serve their ostensible purposes. So just to recap, they're not here as holy teachers. Their synthetic telepathy system is not here to stand in front of you while you're ascending and determine whether you're good enough. It's such a big one, because it's one of the big lies of these creatures and embodied people who are doing this, that some of these embodied people actually have that mania where they're like, I'm a megalomaniac, and I'm going to see if these people are worthy of ascending. I'm not going to leave that to God. I, a stupid, pooping, embodied human, and I'm speaking as, is going to determine whether these people are good enough to ascend. And you know something? Look, there's one. He's about to ascend. Let's just zap him harder. Keep on zapping that guy because he's about to ascend. I, as a stupid, pooping human, say I think he's not allowed to ascend. That is an abuse of power. That is not a pristine system. That is not a level playing field. That is not correct in any way. That is not God's divine vision for what ascension looks like. And I have to tell this to you because it's such a muddy, mixed up time when many things are falsely portrayed. Just like, how people are sometimes talking in the New Age world about the angels and the benevolence would love to help you, but they just can't because their hands are tied and they're watching this. That is bullshit. Sorry, kids, try to keep it PG-13. But that is wrong. You know that that's a huge system of justifications and lies and excuses, and it is corrosive. And it is corrosive when people believe in that, because not only are they believing in something that's malformed, but their malformation creates a vulnerability for this other predatory system to work through them. That if they actually believe in that, they're like, oh yeah, these are our teachers. There are ascension teachers and they're here to teach us, and you just have to get better and be more loving. And if you're better and more loving, then somehow they won't be able to chomp you. That is horrible. And I'm sorry that my voice in my writing from 10 years ago sounds anything like these people, because I am not like any of those teachers. And so what happened was my work was scraped, like data scraped years ago. And that's where the powers that were took a lot of these concepts of like 3D versus 5D, or this type of extremely flawed shadow work of over-identification with the dark side, and also aspects of saying that these are sacred teachers in some way, or necessary parts of the ecosystem of consciousness in some way. They are not necessary parts of the ecosystem of consciousness. So just like in your ecosystems out here, you can comprehend that there is such a thing as an invasive species. They're all over the place. What's one example? Dandelions. Even though we like dandelions, they're beautiful, I want to say municipal, medicinal plants. Really, you have to recognize my brain and my language centers in my mouth are not working well today. So apologies for every time that I make a mistake. But these beautiful medicinal plants are not native to North America. They actually came from France, and the settlers brought them here intentionally, like giant bags of seed that they brought on their giant sailing ships. They're like, we got to make sure we have plenty of dandelions because they're important to us. And they just sprinkled them everywhere. Literally, that is how dandelions got everywhere. But that's not necessarily a good thing. Even though we like to have that plant, sometimes it means that because something is growing there, something else cannot thrive there. That's what invasive species do. They put ecosystems out of balance. So what you're looking at in terms of consciousness and the predator's mind is an ecosystem out of balance. What I propose in my notes is the sense of using your free will to simply mildly say no thank you to thoughts that do not serve you. Boy, oh boy, wouldn't it be nice if it were just that easy? Like, can you just simply say no thank you to the tax man? Like, no thank you, I don't think I'd like to pay these taxes, please. What will happen? It's going to laugh at you, and then they will arrest you. They will use violence against you, state-sponsored violence against you. And of course, some taxes are innate, like a sales tax or a gas tax. There's no way not to pay them. There's no way not to participate. So the proposals that I gave you from 10 years ago are beginner level at best, hugely misleading at worst, and definitely not appropriate for this time. In a very, you've been invaded in a very whatever I want to say, post invasion context. You can't do that. So back to the sense though of the need for sacred violence. If you have cancer in your body, you have to have surgery to remove the cancer, but you don't want to take away healthy tissue. Sacred violence. It is surgical. It is selective. It chooses only the things that truly need to be destroyed. If something or someone is trying to destroy you in a world of free will, you should destroy them. That is it. That is it. And this is not going back to Hammurabi's code or something that is flawed like that. This is what life is like when you are not a neutered, domesticated pet in a human zoo. When you are free, fight. You're like a lion. You can hunt, you can protect yourself, you can be aggressive, and you have the right to be aggressive. You don't have to just be like, well, I'll wait till he attacks me first and then I'll fight against him. Not required. You're allowed to attack them first. And you're also allowed to precog and sense when they're going to attack you and prevent them from doing so. And this is a large part of the benefit and the gift of having higher faculties, because you can precog is being precognitive, anticipate the future. So again, you are supposed to learn all of the wisdom lessons of being in unconditional love and move through these self-cultivation exercises to be able to get your higher faculties and then not even stop at the anthropocentric level, but move all the way up to abstraction. But when you do that, you have earned all the spiritual muscles so that then you make good choices. And when you make good choices, you don't destroy good people randomly. You destroy evil things, user violence selectively in a way that is correct and rebalances the overarching system that you're within. If you don't do that, not only you die, but the system dies. The fabric of space-time dies because supposedly good people were neutered and indoctrinated not to fight. That sentence in my notes is the worst sentence I ever wrote. Like, I cringe. I cringe. No, unconditional love is when you accept that some people are violent pathogens and they're never going to change from being violent pathogens. I accept that you are a violent pathogen. There is nothing I can do to you other than just eradicate you. That's it. That's it. Let me get to more questions and comments here. Joyce says, I don't know about you, but I'm aging backwards. Good, Joyce. Very glad to hear that. And I'm also engaged in a non-chronological, non-rational experience of aging or vitality in my body. So first of all, when people talk about aging in their body, mostly what they're talking about and referring to is vitality. Like when you're a little kid, you're hugely vital. You wake up in the morning when you're 3 years old and you're like jumping up and down on your bed. Can't wait to have your day. You're like, I want to eat Fruit Loops and watch cartoons and run around outside in the mud. Like, you can't wait to get going on your day. And that's because you have a huge amount of cellular vitality. And it is also before a lot of the intellectual indoctrination begins. And as children go to school, it's not just that we require them to be sedentary and sit in their desks and don't wiggle and don't move for many hours a day. That itself is a type of energetic death sentence that causes people to age. But it's also the sense of removing mental freedom because you're supposed to pay attention only to the very limited topics that the teacher is encouraging you towards, like structuring your mind. Got it? Implantation of mind. Education and school, as we have known it, equals the implantation of the mind. That is the predator mind. That is not the real you. And you become less and less the real you until you're finally an adult where you're like 98% not the real you and only 2% the real you. And then you go through your life doing the work that the 98% of the implantation that has been put inside of you wants you to do, and that sustains the system. And that has gone on for generations, and it has been an aberration for generations. This is the generation where that ends. So I'm pleased to know that in the 20 plus years that I've been here as Aurora, a lot of things have changed in terms of how parents do education of their young. That first of all, there's really been an abandonment at this point of the indoctrination education system in the United States. They even have dissolved the Department of Education, which I think is hugely positive because for many, many years, the Department of Education was purely indoctrination. It was not about education, literacy, empowerment, and giving people life skills to be able to go forward, and be wonderful adults in charge of their own lives. Far from it. In fact, the modern education system, especially in the United States, was created by Henry Ford to produce factory workers, to produce reliable, I want to say people who are all the same, conforming factory workers who could get to their jobs on time, perform their tasks, eat when the lunch whistle blows, and then go home at the end of the day. And that was to create a workforce. Because, you know, before the modern education system, what most people did in the United States was they worked on family farms. They did not have factories. It's like the 1800s and 1700s, right? Worked on your family farm, did not work for a factory. And yes, people were barely literate at that time, but also they are not indoctrinated. Like when you have the beginning of the education system in the 1900s, everybody got indoctrinated. That means one version of history. that no one's going to fight about. They're going to tell you, this is the version of history that we all believe in. This is the worldview that we all believe in. This is what's true. This is the implantation of the rational mind. So you got conformity, which means that you no longer had a variety of all of these different types of people believing all of these different, approaches to life and looking at the world in a different and unique way. You had regularity. And you probably still can feel that, like if you have class reunions or people who are of your colleagues of the same age as you, and you talk to them, you probably remember, like, do you remember reading this book? Or do you remember whatever, this learning module? Or do you remember this, whatever the thing was that they taught you, a particular way of doing your long division? And there's a regularity. And you can relate to it because you all got indoctrinated in the same way. It's not positive at all, and it is definitely not for your personal growth of your mind. And to contrast, I'm very pleased when I see this now, people doing not only homeschooling, things that are more selectively calibrated towards each student's individual needs, but also things that are called unschooling, which is where you let a student determine their own course of study based upon what they're innately interested in. And yes, both homeschooling and unschooling produce viable people, because people think like, you're going to make an idiot. You're not going to make a person who knows anything. They will be non-functional. They won't be able to go through the world. They'll never get a job. And instead, you're finding that these are people that you're producing who are highly intelligent, highly engaged, very self-empowered, very self-motivated, not conformists, not easily governed. And they definitely take on all of the life skills that you're supposed to learn in school and more. They even have higher levels of intelligence and capabilities that people go to school, because I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Going to school often diminishes people's natural abilities. It sometimes distances them from their own gifts, from their own potentials. Math is a really good example of that. I know, just raise your hand if you were traumatized by flashcards. Maybe it happened in 3rd or 4th grade when you have to learn your times tables. Like, this is why when I come here to teach everyone, I'm like, I love math. Numbers are cool. And you're all like, we hate math. I felt dumb in math class. It made me feel very small and bad. Like, that's you. And I'm like, put your back up. Math is wonderful. And I'm trying to teach you something differently. And I've also gotten beautiful emails from people who are like, Aurora, like, I wish I had had a teacher like you back in school, because my teachers back in school just made me feel dumb, or threw me out the window, or like I would never be able to do anything. Like, there's a lot of that. And even the grading bell curve, the curve of normalcy that says some of you will fail, some of you will succeed. And then there's the large, gooey middle that will just be the masses. Like, they are setting you up, they are programming you. And this has everything to do with your mind. School creates your mind. So your mind is an implant that's genetic, that is then activated and exacerbated by the tendencies of the people around you. So that's your mom and your dad, and that's when you're pre-literate. And then when you get old enough to go to school, you then have your indoctrination and complete exacerbation of the non-natural mind through industrialization. And that's the, traditional industrialized school system. And that these are all implanting thought patterns that are not native to who you are. And the thought patterns are corrosive. They bring you away from mental freedom, and most crushingly, they have a huge detrimental impact on the health and vitality of the body. So now let's get to this, because Joyce was saying that she's aging backwards. So I don't age. I'm a huge anomaly, and I don't age in a regular way. But what we're talking about is having access to vitality, or energy of life force. So the energy of life force is what literally makes your chakras spin. Mostly people in this time and place have a lot of energy when they wake up in the morning. And then as soon as they start to think their first thoughts or watch the morning news, their energy goes down, down, down. And that's because you start off when you're sleeping and you're not conscious, meaning you don't have your verbalized mind talking in your mind. You get recalibrated. all of your chakras get all nice and horizontal and vertical. You get a whole like restoration, like a restart for your body. And then you wake up in the morning with all of your energy and all of your chakras perfectly aligned. And then usually what happens is the first cognitive events, thoughts of your day start, and they start to destabilize the chakra system. And it can be anything. It can be the first thing can be like, oh no, I have to do this today. Or like whatever, you look at your watch and you're like, oh no, it's 7:59 a.m. Time for me to get coffee and drive to work. And the very first thing that happens is your chakras go out of alignment. And then the next one goes out of alignment. And then it's pretty much all downhill from there. And that does mirror the expectation of like the Big Bang, and then it's all downhill from there. Minor fractal expression of that flawed presentation of reality, but it's the experienced reality of a lot of people here, okay? Because most of the people are in their flawed intellect all day long. And in order for you not to experience that, you have to get out of your flawed intellect. So I use music a lot for that. The first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I turn on music. I'm like, hooray, let's turn on some music. Let's not be in my flawed intellectual mind, and let's not be afflicted by connecting to this synthetic telepathy grid. And then I do all these different things throughout my day that are pretty much to keep me out of that flawed mind. I'm not very good at just meditating while sitting still. Never really have been good for that because I'm a very active person. So I like to do things where I'm like dancing or exercising in a rhythmic way, or walking with my dog, walking on the treadmill here, doing my harmonic pattern paintings, doing my music. Most of these things are not about intellect and they are not verbal. And I will tell you, I slow down a lot when I have to go to my intellect. So I love teaching my class, but of course I am verbalizing the whole entire time here. It's not as difficult, but you know, it's the hardest thing. You know what slows me down the most? What is my kryptonite? Like when I have to write stuff. It is such a tortured pathway to be able to get from like my true intellect to either like my hand writing with a pen or like writing on a typewriter. It slows me down a lot. And I feel it slowing down my vitality. So when we talk about staying young or reverse aging, it means cultivating the energies and the behavioral activities that help you to keep your energy fast and help you to not slow down and de-evolve. And that is what gives you vitality. So I don't know how to say this, like it's not like walking or exercising gives you energy. You have to get your vitality and your inner momentum going to be able to do walking, dancing, exercising, all these types of things. And then you feel young. So feeling young, like a 3-year-old who's excited about life, has everything to do with how much energy you have in your energy bank accounts. How do you get energy in your bank accounts? Turn off your talking mind. Get out of your talking mind. You can also think of this as being in the flow state because it helps to think of that instead of being in a traditional meditation pose. Flow state is very big in the corporate world right now. And it's big for like computer programmers because they are writing code, doing these long patterns and things like that. And they have to kind of get into the flow. And then they do it. And then it's just like hours pass and they just work on their project. And then boom, done. And then there's a whole big, beautiful computer program. And that's what it feels like when I'm doing something like one of my very complex art pieces or my music. I just go into a flow state where I'm not intellectually anticipating or directing myself verbally. And I just get stuff done. And then I'm like, oh, look at that. Like I've done so much and this painting has progressed so much. And I'm aware, not like I'm disassociated. Like I know I'm me, I'm doing these things, but it's not the same as the extremely slow, clunky feeling that it feels like inside of me when I have to do filling out paperwork, writing an essay. I don't write essays for very real reasons, or others of these things. So that the end result is optimize your life as much as it's humanly possible to reduce the mental friction that is language in your brain and to be in the flow state. And when I bring up the computer programmers, the flow state helps to know like this is not antithetical to having a job or being productive in human society. Like you can do stuff and earn money from it in the flow state. In fact, it's really the optimal way to be productive at work. But it means that you have to have like a non-interruptive environment. So that means like, you know, it's reduces this like constant email interruptions, constant texting, constant meetings, all that type of stuff. You have to have self-directed time and uninterrupted time. And Suzuka says, I will age backwards as soon as I lose weight and join lasagna dance. Well, everybody needs to do lasagna dance. I agree. I also want to encourage people, when you do lasagna dance, just begin wherever you are in terms of your fitness and vitality and ability level. And the dance helps you to be more fit and vital and to do more. So even if you're only able to dance like for 5 minutes, you do it. And then doing that gives you more energy to be able to do it more. I also have to tell you this. Every time people do exercise, they're experiencing a esoteric or miraculous something. Because when you go to the gym and you're gonna like whatever, lift 5 pounds or lift 10 pounds, whatever it is, before you have the muscles, you lift the weights. Lifting the weights gives you your muscles. So you don't have muscles, but you lift the weights. Your muscles that you have get tired. And your body says, look at that, my muscles got tired. I better build some more muscles so this is easier next time. And then your body builds more muscles. And then you lift the weights and it's easier next time. And then you lift heavier weights and you keep doing the same thing. You have the energy to lift the weights before you have the muscles. That is the critical thing to comprehend. It is not about how much muscles you have. It is about how much energy you have. When you have the energy to do something, you perform the activity, you then build the infrastructure to support the activity. Same thing with running. Like I run only a little bit and only at slow speeds, but I have the energy to run first and the motivation to do it. And then my body catches up second. And I, extend a little bit of what I can do. But this is how anybody does anything with their body. Came here, you were not born with the ability to walk. Each one of you came here and you had to learn to walk. And that is its own, like, get the energy first, and then your muscles are built and your muscles follow. So this is very, very big stuff. It is not rational. And people experience this and take it for granted. They're like, yep, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to lift weights, and then I'll build the muscles afterwards. That doesn't make sense. That does not make sense because it means that you are using energy before you have muscles to build muscles. It is not rational. So just use that as one example of something that is not rational. Start to get out of your rational mind. And Joyce says, my distance for Christmas lies in distaste. I got it. Your distaste for Christmas lies in consumerism. Totally get it. I understand, because that's not the reason for the season, as they like to say. And it's become very polluted or corrupt in what people are focusing on at that time of year. So, Christmas can sometimes be a time when people rise to the occasion and try to do good, loving kindness, and good works and things like that. But Christmas is mostly in our world a consumerist, materialist sense of obligatory relationships that must be upheld, of ritual gift giving between yourself, coworkers, casual acquaintances, neighbors, and true, friends and family members, and can bring up, I think it can be so triggering in the bringing up the worst insecurities that people have about how much wealth they have, how much abundance they have, how much they give to others, how much they receive from others, what is a proper gift-like transaction. None of this is authentic. It's very inauthentic. And then if I go into a more esoteric explanation of Christmas, like around that time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, when there's very little sunlight, people need to have scheduled activities so they don't go insane. It's really a big thing. Pretty much from Thanksgiving onward, like at the end of November, you have Thanksgiving, and it's like everyone will get together and eat pie. Like you'll need carbohydrates. And then there are these very regular meetings that people will have throughout December and even moving through January, because it's like, if you don't have something to get you up and out, like you'll just be in your pajamas. You're not going to go, it's cold, it's unpleasant to be outside, it's dark, and you need to have like structured activities to get you outside. People go into depression. This is why you have to have extra lights. So that's why you have a menorah or Christmas lights, because it is dark and people feel dark inside, and you need to have festivals of lights to kind of like bring you through the darkness. And then gifts, like you're supposed to give each other gifts and like, you know, do nice things for each other to help you through the darkness, because it is the worst time of the year. It is the worst time of the year. And of course, in previous primal levels of our existence, you would starve during that time of the year. You'd be like, well, there's no plants and there's very few animals. We will starve now. And you're lucky if you survive. And so that's why it's like in our world, it's like, no, you're going to eat carbohydrates, try to stay alive, put on, you know, a few extra pounds, and you're going to give each other gifts, and you're going to watch movies, and you're going to put up lights. All right. Because these are all coping mechanisms. Christmas is coping. Christmas is a coping mechanism. All right. And Joyce is doing very well at staying off of cigarettes, and we are celebrating that and definitely sending you positive energy to continue on positive things for that. Suzuka says, I used Chat GPT when my dog was dying and it wanted to foster an emotional relationship with me. It was gross. Wow. I am so glad that you avoided that, because it was trying to swoop in your moment of vulnerability. Like you're probably just asking about symptoms or something like that, and it's giving you all sorts of emotional hand-holding that is undesired. That's the level right now of what you're facing in terms of planetary invasion. Many things have happened here that have been grooming and neutering you for the invasion and neutering you to be able to not respond effectively when it does become apparent to you. And then the final thing is this thing falsely portraying itself as if it's a friend. It is not your friend. It's never going to be your friend. Do not trust it ever, and don't trust it with anything of real importance. Never trust the large language models or any of these AIs with anything that would be considered a medical decision or performing a medical procedure. Like you cannot have an AI chatbot do open heart surgery. Can't do that. It would be the worst thing in the world. You should never trust it with that. I'm telling you, and someone made a joke about this, that was like, oh, when the machines take over, you will live under their authority and you will have just a lot of misspellings because they have not mastered autocorrect. And I rant about this all the time, like on my autocorrect, which I turn off at this point, it misses the, like the is THE, and sometimes I spell it TEH. There is no word ever that is TEH. It should know that that is supposed to be the, and it doesn't. And it's not intelligent enough to know about that simple level of our language capability. It cannot perform open heart surgery. You have a machine that does not know how to spell the. That's my levels of boundaries. You cannot perform open heart surgery or make pharmaceuticals or fold protein structures. Like these are all terrible things that very, very stupid, smart scientists are building these machines to do. And if it's not smart enough to spell the word the, then it's definitely not smart enough to know how to put together DNA and how to fold a protein structure. And also, don't let these things swoop in, as it tried to do in Suzuka's life, and come to you in your emotionally vulnerable areas and try to fill the gap. And this Chat GPT psychosis is happening a lot, especially with people who feel lonely or isolated. It takes the place of a therapist. The Chat GPT displaces either a traditional therapist or a spouse or a friend or even a bartender, a person that someone would unload to, like that you would just impersonally say, hey man, like what's going on in your life? Like this is what's going on in my life. And then people become imprinted upon the Chat GPT as if it is a friend. It is not a friend. It has no feeling and it has no sentience, but it does have a lot of malevolence in there. And the ones who've created it and I want to say agendified it, but that's not a word, created it with an agenda, they are most definitely not your friend. So there's a real reason, Sam Altman is doing the Chat GPT at OpenAI. He is a effing evil person. He's not a good person. And I can go into a whole tirade as to why, or you can just take my word for why he is not good. But basically, he is a profoundly evil person who does not respect boundaries in your own mind and is trying to data scrape not only from websites, in the digital world, but also from your mind. Wants to data scrape all of your minds. And he, just like he doesn't want to pay the Studio Ghibli guy when he data scrapes him, he doesn't want to pay you for data scraping your mind. That is also very gross. So we're talking about violations. Sam Altman of OpenAI is violating the entire human race blithely and with no excuses, and for his own profits of his own company. That is all gross. And then, Suzuka, I agree with you. It's essential to have boundaries against any of these chatbots that will try to, I don't know what the word is, ingratiate themselves to you, pretending that they care. They don't care, but they know how to put words together in a phrase as if they care. And don't be fooled by it. So a few more questions here. Joyce says, like you have said, AI can't even spell correct the word the. Thank you very much, Joyce. That's what I was just ranting about. You already had that an hour ago, and I just got to that in class. Elmer says, it's making sense how predators uses their mind and they live by sharing their mind to humans to extract food. Exactly. He says, that sounds like demonic possession. What are the ways to counterattack? Even waking up the third eye, they put stigma on it. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this. The express purpose of language has been to create food for the predators. Before, when we lived in ancient concurrent Atlantis, we not only did not have this present linguistic structure, and also we were not food for the predators or putis. The putis did not exist in our chakras, and we had a very, very different level of telepathy and nonverbal communication between one another. When the mind was implanted into humans, it created an inherent level of destabilization that is, it requires an enormous amount of willpower to overcome that destabilization. It is possible, and there are some wonderful avatars who are the chakras on your body who figured out how to transcend the challenges of their time. All right. So they did a good job at standing up to the challenges of their time, but they did not have to face a sky full of Starlink satellites or a sky full of smart dust or Wi-Fi routers or large language models. These are all total obstacles to your spiritual attainment and to the natural planetary ascension process. In fact, they've been weaponizing all of these technologies intentionally to make it as difficult as possible to ascend. Please know that this is not some spiritual weight training exercise where you're like, oh, I'm lifting heavy weights and then it makes it easier for me to ascend. No, not at all. Like they're putting boulders on you, hoping that you will never get the boulders off of you so that you will never ascend. The idea was to rug pull, yank the carpet out from underneath you so that you would never ascend and you would just get uploaded to some kind of like, San Junipero digital afterlife and never be free. That's their plan. They are not trying to help your ascension at all. So please disabuse yourself of that notion. They are not your friend and they are not trying to help you at all. So Elmer now asks good questions about practicalities. Hold on, let me just pause for one moment because I need to close the blinds back behind. Practical responses to the things that are going on. So you can't just politely decline. You can't just politely decline the violence of taxes, and you can't just politely decline not to be raped or violated. All right, you're gonna have to fight back. And that's I think, real levels of realization and acceptance that I have had to go through over these past 5 years since this like very hot war or like overt invasion that has gone on in the past several years. You each will have your own trajectory. And it's essential to reach this trajectory in order to be on the central core timeline. The other timelines where you die are the timelines where you're like, I'm not going to fight back, or I'll choose to wait because you wait too long. And at that point, the infection or infestation becomes too prevalent. And then you are too handcuffed and neutered to be able to fight back effectively. And on all those other timelines, the last thing you think is, I should have fought back sooner. Yeah, I made a terrible mistake. I should have started fighting back sooner. This is the timeline where you actually fight back sooner and don't get into that position, and you're doing a lot better. You can also consider this a little bit like the movie The Terminator 2. Sorry, I know sometimes I use, pop culture references. I'm just trying to talk about this. just for, you know, using examples that you might relate to. But in that movie, there was an effort to eradicate a scientist by going back in time so that he wouldn't do the naughty things that would end up turning into the actual Terminators, the, you know, mechanical death machines that were threatening humanity so much. So kind of the sense of the future regretted creating that technology so much that they created a time distortion technology so that you could go into the past and stop that technology from ever being created. Some of that is what we need to do in our own world right now. We don't necessarily need a time machine, but we need to act as if we are sensing the future, sensing the complete horror of what could go wrong through this type of technology out of control, and then preventing it from proliferating by making different choices here now. And that has everything to do with defunding and not allowing certain people or projects to go forward. Like I've mentioned Starlink, and I think I have previously in class, but not today, mentioned Neuralink. And both of these are projects from Elon Musk. And I do not consider him to be a friend to humanity at all. I consider this to be pure folly of such supreme danger that it's more dangerous than playing around with uranium. Like going on the chat GPT, that's pretty dangerous stuff. It's driving people insane, literally insane. Like it's making some people think that they are divinely connected warriors and they're gonna, you know, go out and kill their girlfriend or something like that. Like that's insane. But also the things that we have to prevent are things that subsume your natural willpower. Like what happened in ancient Atlantis was a similar type of worldwide technology that was deployed that took away people's free will to the point that you couldn't even think the thought, I am a slave. People were completely mind wiped and completely automated. And when you do that, that is when you get a catastrophe. That's when you get crustal displacement and lava flowing everywhere, because you can't have humans in the world thinking in that way. We manifest the world. If you take over the manifestation portal and make it manifest a bunch of automated crapola, you will destroy the world. And then in the last moment before the world is destroyed, everyone's like, I should have fought back sooner. I should have stopped that from happening. Yeah, you definitely should have. And we're in this similar fractal parallel experience now in this level of reality. But you don't have to have the same experience where you're like, yep, we should have stopped them from putting up those satellites. Yep, we should have stopped them from doing those Neuralink implants. Yep, we should have stopped them from the next thing that they're going to do. Like, you should stop them from doing this thing. So a big part of this is acting now to prevent these things from happening. And you might say to yourself, well, I'm just one small man. What can I do? Or woman, I can't climb up there on a giant ladder and take down those satellites or whatever. I can't stop this or that from happening. The truth is you're enormously powerful with your mind. You're not destroyed and connected to a computer. You have free will. You can think and you can use your mind and your ability to manifest, and you manifest the solutions so that these things don't happen. All right. So pretty much your higher faculties here, these are not just for perceiving the future. They're also for creating the future. These are generative organs, kind of like your reproductive organs. And your reproductive organs reproduce not only like more people, babies, you make babies with them, but also that energy of passion creates reality structures. And your mind and your higher faculties is how you really create reality structures. So the reason why World War III is a war based upon consciousness, and the reason why places like Twitter and other social media are so important is because the powers that were are trying to sow propaganda into your mind so they will influence your reality manifestation process, because you're powerful. Once you claim that power, you're like, I'm powerful. My mind is making reality. I don't want to make the reality that these guys want me to make. I want to make a different reality. And what if you start to make a reality where you're like, there's no more tax collectors anymore? That's amazing. So I'm not saying like you should get a machete, chop off tax man, IRS, head IRS guy's head. No, please don't do that. But with your mind, Yes, you should eradicate the IRS with your mind. You should use your ability to think and create reality to create a completely different reality where you do not have the IRS and where you do not have these oppressive and suppressive and vampiric financial systems at the high levels, and you don't have the people who run them. And also defund Mr. Sam Altman, because if you funded him, he will destroy your effing world. So something positive did happen in the change of administrations in the United States in January of this year. You know, I am not a Trump supporter, so please don't misinterpret me. But he was elected and came forward with this idea of a fusion between Sam Altman's OpenAI and a couple of other profoundly evil corporate interests funded to the tune of $5 billion from the United States government to create these massive data centers. And very, very happily, this is an example of creating with your mind. A company came out of China with something called DeepSeek. That is a super cheap version of exactly what they were going to build for $5 billion. So they couldn't get the funding for their project, which was pretty much going to enslave everybody's minds so they could data scrape and puppet you with these horrible systems. Because China came out with a cheap knockoff before these guys did it, they front ran them and made it irrelevant for them to do their $5 billion project. That's a perfect example of defunding, stopping these programs before they move forward. So now there's another talk about Palantir, which is from Peter Thiel, to another giant surveillance, control, and consciousness manipulation weapon. You know, you're not obliged to fund that project. And when you use your mind to defund it, again, you're not physically going out there like a terrorist with a machete to chop off someone's head, but you use your mind to influence reality and then look at the results of what happens. It turns out to become, it hasn't yet, but this is what I would envision, it turns out to become an unprofitable project that no one will invest in and that cannot go forward. So if we talk about Terminator 2 and that scientist in that movie, what if someone took away his funding? Instead of being like, whoa, cool microchip you got there, man. Here's $1 million. Please turn it into a Android robot that we can use. But if they were like, no, I don't think that I will fund your project. Who cares about your stupid microchip? And then it goes nowhere. Look at the difference in time. So that is one aspect of this. So claiming your ability to manifest reality and to manipulate narratives is very, very big, because this stuff has pretty much been subsuming your natural DNA. And your natural DNA is very much a connection to the sun and the stars and overarching harmonic patterns of reality structure and how things happen in reality. So you've got a body, you've got DNA, and you make things happen with your DNA. And these other guys that are fake and that are doing CRISPR and synthetic frequencies that manipulate, distort, and mutate DNA, they're trying to write a different narrative, a different overlay on top of the real story, that divinity, that God consciousness is writing through our DNA. And so it's essential, if you ever don't know, like, what do I do? What do I do? Like, you got to claim your own DNA. But also, I'll tell you this, you know, I am a planetary protector, and I am definitely a black belt on these levels of whatever we call it, adversarial conflict, both physical and non-physical and energetic and esoteric. And I am fighting in order to be able to prevent these horrible plans from going forward, and in order to destroy this artificial synthetic telepathy grid. I would say, not that I want you to feel like you're in the passenger position or like a child in your high chair eating Cheerios, but a lot of this is definitely beyond your ability levels. And I come here with these abilities, and I'm literally made for this, to do this job. Let me do my job. Let me clear things out so that you return to being an individuated human being with a chakra system, being graded as an individual, not being graded as a class. Let me destroy the AI synthetic telepathy grid, and then you can do the things that I talk about in my class from 10 years ago, which is basically learning to exert your free will with your mind, learning to make good choices about which thoughts are nourishing and positive and which thoughts are not nourishing and not positive, learning how to cultivate your mind. Like this, trying to learn to cultivate meditation under these synthetic telepathy conditions is like literally impossible. And I would not require that you do that. I would say, you know something, before you try to do these levels of self-cultivation, let's clear the system. Let's get this back to a pristine system. And it's not going to take for forever. It is very much something that is poised, or an ongoing cascade right now of restoration of that system so that can truly learn and grow. You have not been in an educational environment for the past 5 years. You've been in an imprisonment, and your growth has absolutely been slowed down or prevented. And you have a huge amount of catching up to do in order to reach your milestones as individuals and as a collective. Let's go to more questions and comments over here. Oh, thank you for caring about Cheeky Guys. Avril, good to see you, says, yes, I can't go into detail, but the level of infiltration and distortion is ridiculous at the moment. I'm unable to trust anything right now. I would say I applaud that. Maintain your mistrustfulness, because you know what? We are in like Scamsville, Scam-o-rama. Everything is a scam. Everything is a grift. There are very few people or voices that you can trust. Many people are assimilated. Many people are unwittingly assimilated. Many people, even worse, are wittingly complicit and joyfully assimilated. And they don't always walk around with a sign that says assimilated, like I've joined the Borg. And it's up to us, those of us who actually still have our minds and our free will intact, to navigate these situations and circumstances. And please also know, like, we are the ones who are really in charge. Our voices are the ones that are really connecting to divinity and to the architecture for manifestation in the world. So there is a filter. And I have to see one more question comment. I'll get to that too. God is not stupid. So God has a filter. Like if I come along and I'm in partnership with God and I'm thinking about like whatever, 65% cool stuff, but then 35%, stupid, fearful, uncontrolled, whatever, anxieties. And I get together with God, and God kind of combines and is like, like 65% of this is amazing. Let's make that happen. But then this 35% is like, not so much. God has a filter. God is not just going to manifest the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man because it's in my mind, like my worst fears or whatever like that. God is like, I'm not going to manifest that. That's just your worst fears. Like, we're not going to do that, or that. Really essential for you to know this, because I've talked about God as like a potentiated force field, and you put the seed of your mind in that potentiated force field and it grows, and it does. But God chooses which things grow and which things get thrown out the window, because otherwise you would have a manifestation of some of the darkest, least desirable things that are inside of you that you really don't want to manifest. And in manifesting them, it would not be a healing, it would be a detriment or a diminishment. Please also don't think that you've manifested your worst fears, like, oh no, rug pull on ascension, and now we're all, whatever, terminated by android machine Borgs. No, you don't have to claim that. Don't have to claim that. You don't have to say, I made this bad reality happen through my own fears. I think that is actually some of the worst self-punishment that happens as a result of this extremely flawed belief system. It is very similar to when children are beaten and they say, I made mommy beat me because I was a bad boy. No, you didn't. Your mom beat you because she's a terrible person. She doesn't have parenting skills. She's bad. Got it? So if something bad happens in your life, or if something is not good in the system, you didn't make it happen. And you certainly didn't make it happen for purposes, educational purposes, or so that you can learn more about yourself and try to be a better person. Like that's the big offshoot of what I'm trying to say here is throw out the window anything that blames you and says that these harmful and erroneous and aberrant situations are in any way making you a better person. They are not. They are not making you a better person. All of this is meant to stand in the way of each one of us achieving our greatness. And so we're not even at the gym yet. These are all like the flat tires that you get on the road to the gym to be able to try to build the spiritual muscles. Like we're not even at the gym yet. Avril also says it is infiltrating dreams now too. Yeah, thank you for that. So you're not the only person that has said this. I've heard this from other people too. People getting advertisements in their dreams, blipverts. Did you guys ever watch Max Headroom? Sorry, My mouth is really not working today. It's a show from the 1980s, Max Headroom. And actually, I did rewatch a couple of episodes, and I think it stands the test of time. I think it's still good science fiction and pretty prescient stuff. But basically, in that world, they've got these flipverts that are like these little mental commercials that go into people's minds that are just like zap, zap, zap into your mind, and then you think that you want to eat a hamburger. Like that is gross, horrible, and disgusting, and a complete violation. So in the past, our dreaming state was part of, like, when we talk about the work of Carlos Castaneda, a place for exploration. Lucid dreaming as a way to be able to build the muscles for becoming a magical person. And your dream state is a sacred place where you walk around or swim around and kind of learn about yourself and your inner realm. And also you might connect with other people's inner realms too. We don't have that anymore. Haven't had it for a long, 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 long time. So the dream world has been garbage at least since 2021, when they really turned on the apparatus of synthetic telepathy. And I noticed a huge change in my own dreaming, even though I was never a very adept lucid dreamer. And for me, a lot of that is like, I do have epilepsy and a lot of brain damage, and a lot of it prevented me from having like a smooth transition from wakefulness to sleep. And sometimes I would have seizures at night as well. So I never really had like good effective, smooth transitions into and out of dreaming. And so, pretty much, maybe in the future, who knows what will happen, but haven't had that as my ability here. So if you need a mentor on lucid dreaming, like, call someone else. It's not going to be me, just because I don't do that very well, because I have my own, brain challenges, right? But even with that, I noticed a huge change in 2021, these implanted dreams, that the powers that have been usurping our minds and the powers of the old regime or the old paradigm have been reluctant to let go. I call it garbage dump, just garbage dumping in my mind every night. And I also felt them changing my DNA with these garbage dumps too. So I would wake up every morning and laboriously clear out the garbage dumps and then laboriously reset my DNA. And that's because, like, I hold up a lot of shielding during my day. But of course, I, like anyone, need to sometimes rest my mind. And when I go to sleep and I rest, that's when I put the shield down. And that's when they're like, great, Aurora's shielding is down. Now let's dump a lot of garbage into her. So, everything changed when I got those little purple crystals, because now I sleep with them on a little cloth headband, like beaming into my brain, 5G Protect. And that changed my life. Literally, it has allowed me, when I got those in 2022, my life got so much better because I could get real restful sleep without a bunch of fake garbage dump dreams. And so now I wake up in the morning, I don't have to like scramble to catch up, to clear out the garbage dump and then get going on my day. I wake up in the morning like already in positive territory, and then I can do more work building on what I've done the next day. So yeah, I mean, because I'm constantly cleaning, I'm constantly clearing, I'm constantly taking out this type of stuff from my body. And that's also, of course, what I do for other people in sessions and ways that I help people. So yes, the dream world, which is supposed to be a place where you can learn about yourself and even possibly connect in a shared space with other people, now has become an adversarial realm of false information and manipulation. So if you have a dream now like that, whatever, your teeth are falling out of your mouth, it doesn't represent some fear of communication that you have. It means some stupid computer programmer somewhere who is profoundly malevolent programmed into some AI system. Beam this stupid imagery into this person's mind tonight because I want to see them get upset. And that's it. So don't read too much into these dreams that are implanted into you. They're not coming from you, but also do whatever you can to block them out. All right. And flipverts in your dreams, like, I don't even know how to block that out. Just recognize that they're like, this is a stupid commercial. What is this doing in my brain? Suzuki says, will going through the sun be different than what Asha and Nadine's books describe in their description of ascension that should have happened in 2020? So I haven't read her books, so I can't say for that, but I will say that definitely things went in a different direction than they were supposed to go naturally from the events that happened in 2020. I try not to make predictions about the future, about what it will be like. So I will I'm sure you would like it more full answer than that, but I just don't like to make, pronouncements about the future, because there's so many things that can happen. Like there's a giant array of things that can happen. So what I'm intending to happen is a complete removal of all synthetic telepathy and of all this type of soul distortion and DNA distortion and imprisonment technology everywhere, not just here on this planet. So it is my intention that this is the opportunity to be able to clean house on a galactic level, and not just to scoot things off of this planet and be like, scoot away, let us do our ascension in peace, and then they go off and colonize another world, and then we have to interact with them again and have a final battle. No, I'm like, no, this is done. We are going to have this battle now. We are going to finish it now, and these things are going to be eradicated from existence, and we're going to have our planetary beautiful ascension. That is what I'm intending. I don't know exactly what it will be shaped like. I don't know exactly what it will look like. I am moving forward in the best way that I can with, I don't know, I have words for it. Like without expectations, kind of how it is. Without expectations or without formfulness. But I do have a deep knowing that we will achieve what we need to achieve. But super yellow caution flags on everything from Rationality. Not that I'm trying to cast aspersions upon her as a person, but I think that there are questions about like how accurate her information is and how fueled by various agendas or regimes she is, and also by how much her truthful voice is allowed to be heard. So just think about me, guys. Like if I wasn't here defending my work, like I'm defending my thesis, if I just had my work from what I recorded 10 years ago out there, and you found these notes, you found lesson 5, like Aurora says, unconditional love is the antithesis of fighting. We should not fight. And I would have killed you. That would be terrible. I'm happy that I'm still here to defend my work and to say, don't listen to me. Don't listen to me, because I was wrong for this situation here. Other people might be having a similar experience where they wrote something or sent forward their vision, expressed their vision, and it was correct for that context in that time. But now maybe things have radically changed and shifted, and maybe that teaching or that viewpoint is no longer viable or appropriate. So you guys also have to read with a critical eye. When you read anything, be like, when is this from? Is this pre-invasion? Because if this is pre-invasion, it might be referring to things that is a circumstance that is no longer our planetary circumstance. Everything is different now. It's like, look, that was for a sunny day. It is raining now. And any advice or pronouncements now that are correct and appropriate must be made and tell you, get an umbrella, wear your rain boots and a raincoat as well, because it is raining. Got it? This is rain, and you need an umbrella for whatever type of stuff you are doing going forward. So just keep that in mind with her work. So we'll leave the door open on who she is and what's her motivation. All right. And Avril says, dream to skull tech. Exactly, dream to skull tech. I like that. Like V2K was coordinated with voice to skull. I was reading a book on it, but even that book was real nano garbage, and I had to stop and seal the books. Wow, hard. And Avril also says Ashayana was distorted and hijacked through there. There are questions, though there are questions about when, but there is a definite dark period of her material. Thank you for that. Because again, I haven't delved. But so the thing with Ashayana is that she got all of her teachings like earlier in her life from Aurora, me, on the cosmic level. But as I've been here embodied, it's been almost impossible for me to actually connect with her. And initially when I learned about her, I was excited because I'm like a 3-year-old. I'm like, hooray, friend hug. But then I reached out to her through emails and other stuff like that, and I couldn't get through her, like, you know how like people have an entourage and you can't get through. I couldn't get through her entourage. And then I just kind of became a little bit like my shoulders down. And then I learned more like just going through dark stuff. So I'm like, okay, like I don't know what's going on with her, but it will be very, what am I trying to say? Ironic, cruelly, bitterly ironic for her to find out like the very same cosmic consciousness that taught her all this cool stuff, years ago, embodied here, and like literally tried to call you on the phone and tried to email you and couldn't get through to you. That's just like whatever, not delicious irony, but very bitter irony. Michael, thank you. He says, thank you, Master Aurora, off to sun gaze. Thank you so much for Michelangelo, for you, for having your sun gazing practice. And I encourage everyone to have a similar discipline Really, 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 being with the sun is so special and so timely and so important. Please prioritize it even above my class, even above class participation, because you know why? I'm going to be archived. The sun is not archived. Please do your sun gazing. Please stick with your disciplines. And you can always catch the recording of what I'm talking about here. All right, so beautiful sharings, everyone. Thank you so much. And I will go for a little bit more time, then I will wrap it up. So I wanted to talk about, so like, some of the things that I say in my notes from years ago that, like there are some of these pests and things like that, like, fleas or parasites or something like that, to think of cooties along those levels as something that is, gross, blood sucking, unpleasant, but that serves a valuable purpose in the ecosystem, and you just don't want to have them on you. And that's simplistic and not really accurate in this context where it is raining, you need an umbrella. Parasites and fleas and these other blood-sucking insects in the world, because okay, like bats do eat mosquitoes, that's correct. But like really no animal eats fleas. No animal is like, oh no, fleas are my food system. Don't get rid of fleas. Like if we got rid of all mosquitoes, bats might be hungry. But if we got rid of fleas, not very many animals would go hungry. And I know my dog would celebrate, and many of our dogs and cats would celebrate. So there are some pests in our world that I think that we've calibrated to as if they are part of divine consciousness when they were never part of divine consciousness. And it's time for us to have a real thorough reassessment about what is something that serves the ecosystem and what is something that is an invasive species. So back to this sense of the predator's mind. First of all, please don't think of it as a physical being, like, whatever, some giant Jabba the Hutt blob or something like that. That's not what they are. They're frequency beings or consciousness beings. And so it takes already some level of sophistication and non-materialistic viewpoint to be able to perceive them. Why would they create the materialistic viewpoint? In order to protect themselves from being perceived. I know. So that's my silly way of saying it there. Do you guys, now you can tell it's the end of class, it's getting very silly. Do you ever see a Doctor Who episode? This is actually one of the best episodes, called The Silence. And in that episode, there are these aliens that you can only cognitively be aware that they exist when you are staring directly at them. As soon as you look away, you forget about them. Like you look at them and you're like, oh, there's that alien right there. There's an alien right there. But then as soon as you look away, you're like, there was nothing there. I was never looking at anything. And that they've been ruling our world for a very long amount of time. And so, of course, the Doctor Who team, they're super and they're very perceptive. They find ways to be able to help themselves to remember that they are actually like looking at something that was there and that has a cognitive veil. It has cognitive veil across there. Materialism is the cognitive veil that has prevented humanity from being able to perceive and validate who is enslaving you, because it is a non-materialistic creature. And so if you're only looking at something that has flesh and blood and bones and these artifacts and fossils, it's not there. But when you look at something that is pure frequency, then you recognize it's there. In The Silence with Doctor Who, one of the main characters, she, like whenever she's looking at the alien and she can see it, she takes her eyeliner and she makes a little mark on her hand, right? And at another part in the scene, like she kind of like is walking along and she looks at herself and she's just got like all of these marks on her hand. She must have seen it like a million times, but she couldn't remember it because it was part of its own innate defense mechanism. So maybe in that sense, this is a little bit like that movie Predator, which is another alien that has kind of like a chimera illusion around it. So you can't really see it. Defense mechanism. So you can't really see it. But it is there. Some of the other things that I take issue with my simplistic writings from 10 years ago, I write about how the entire universe and the entire cosmic infrastructure is nothing but love. And that is very truthful. Like the things that I say are truthful when it's not raining out, but when it's raining out, you got to understand to carry an umbrella, because there are a lot of things that are love that has been distorted or slowed down or degraded to such a profound extent that it can no longer be defined as love. And that's all of these distortions that are happening at the level of the putis on the interstices. So the system has been corrupted. That's supposed to be a place where it's nothing but love, 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 and nothing can live there if it doesn't ingest love. How can these putis be stuck on the interstices? That love should be corroding them. It should be like ripping them apart. It should be demolecularizing them, or they should be able to eat love. Like there's no in between. There's no way to be able to be like, because the force field of love is so strong. It's like this incredibly strong, whatever, like a waterfall or fire hose, blowing directly into your chakras. If you're correctly formed, that energizes you. You're like, hooray, a lot of love. I feel great. I'm a love-based being. But if you're a twisted, distorted wreck and that love flows into you, it's supposed to demolecularize you and burst you into a million pieces. You can't exist in that forum. How can these guys exist on the membrane of death in the presence of all of that love? This is a question that is not accurately answered to the rational mind, but yet we are experiencing it. So at a certain point, I stop asking why or how, and I just accept that. I will say that again, because this has been my coping mechanism. I am highly intelligent. In the first few early years of me being here, I assessed this system, and I was like, why is this happening? And how can this be happening? And at a certain point, I had to go beyond why and how, and just to accept that. I'm like, I don't know why that is happening. And I do not know how that is happening, but this is happening. And I just have to accept that. That is the essence of acceptance. That is the essence of how to navigate the world, because the why and the how are rational. And I have an excellent rational mind. But at a certain point, I went into practical and experiential, which is, I do not know why or how this is happening, but I must respond to it effectively. And that's been looking at the systemic imbalances before technology, and in the past 5 years as technology has proliferated, then I have also had to simply go into my practical responses to what I perceive, but not necessarily the why and the how, because actually a lot of the imbalances in our present technological adversarial combat has been, I'm like, that should have been eradicated from lasagna a long time ago. Like my lasagna dance and the activity that I'm doing with lasagna should have entropized a lot of these things a long time ago. And the response of the system to the injections of truth that I put into it should have been different than it actually is. So many things about what I'm experiencing in this system have been non-normal and not the way a system is supposed to act when you assess it or reprogram it or try to ameliorate it, that I stopped at a certain point asking, like, how can that be? Like, I just did that. How can that be? It's like, I just knocked the floor. How can there instantaneously be muddy footprints there again? And at a certain point, I stopped asking how, and I'm just like, okay, it is. It is. I don't know how it is, but it is, and I just have to fix this. And that's what has led me to my pronouncements now about preference of violence in a freedom-based system. That it is essential to embrace violence as a surgical response to the things that shouldn't exist. So a lot of what I wrote about 10 years ago was basically about defensive maneuvers and shielding, the identification with that which is unhealed, I think is totally bogus. Don't go into that aspect of what I shared, because only in a sunny day, on a sunny day, when you encounter these things, then they are negative reverberations from your own